Number 10. He died. He got his powers while working as a mercenary for hire for a man named Raoul Bushman, who was looking for an Egyptian tomb. Bushman was a ruthless sort, enjoying the violence he brought to others and killing people to try and find what he wanted. Mark did not enjoy this side of Bushman and punched Bushman after he killed the archaeologist on the expedition, Peter Alrun, in an attempt to protect Peter's daughter, Marlene. During this fight, Bushman ended up getting the upper hand and left him for dead. Fortunately, he was able to make his way back to the tomb before he went unconscious. Marlene and the rest of the exploration team carried his body into the tomb and laid him out below an idol belonging to an Egyptian god, Khonshu. Mark had a vision involving Khonshu, who promised him life in exchange for his loyalty to the god and commitment to do Khonshu's bidding. Mark accepted. Later, Spectre would ponder that he had simply been having near-death hallucinations. Ooh, spooky. Number 9. Military service. Before he was Moon Knight, Mark Spector served in the military as a Marine, and even went to Iraq. While you might not think this is scary, war is actually terrifying. To add to this intensity of his service, he also began having episodes while on tour. Mark actually suffers from dissociative personality disorder, but we'll touch more on that later. He at one point is shown in the comics coming to after seeming to have wandered outside of the military camp, following a voice that called to him in the dark under the full moon. Not only is this in and of itself terrifying, as it could have compromised his fellow soldiers' safety, but concern is expressed by those who leave the camp to find him when they tell him he has actually walked into a minefield. Boom. Number 10. Rare blood disease. What's a Hulk to do when they lack control over their own monstrous transformation? Why, recruit a vampire to help you do so, of course. Monster to monster, so to speak. Before She-Hulk could control her transformation, she would become the Hulk in a similar way to Bruce, whenever she got angry. It wasn't until Savage She-Hulk issue 11 and 12 where she almost died from a rare blood disease and sought the help of Morpheus, vampire and brilliant hematologist, that this changed. He gave her a serum that cured her disease and also allowed her to gain control of her transformative abilities. And voila, we were given the capable and in control She-Hulk that we still have today. Number 9. She almost died. Jennifer Walters actually became She-Hulk as a result of almost dying. When Bruce goes to find Jen in issue 1 of the Savage She-Hulk, we find out she's been practicing criminal law, and it is her involvement in the criminal world that gets her shot at for working to put criminals away. Bruce is with her at the time and works hard to keep cool so he can help Jen before she bleeds out. He breaks into a doctor's house conveniently across the street, where no one is home, and uses the doctor's medical equipment to give her an emergency blood transfusion. Whose blood does he use? Why, his own, of course. It's all he has at the time. Yeah, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief required in the first few pages of this issue. Anyways, while recovering in the hospital, the goons who shot her return to finish the job. When becoming enraged, she transforms into the She-Hulk. Talk about a frightening situation. Number 8. Her addiction. Walters has never really made it a secret in the comics that she prefers being the She-Hulk. In fact, the interesting thing about her relationship with being green versus her cousins is that while Bruce thinks of his Hulk ego as something that is a hindrance to his humanity, Jennifer thinks of it as an asset. She finds that she is more confident as She-Hulk, keeping in mind she still also has a level head when she transforms, but still, it is kind of scary how much she loses herself in her transformation, or at least thinks she does. In She-Hulk Volume 2 Issue 19, we see her condemned as being a She-Hulk addict in court by Mallory Book, and from there Jennifer decides to explore what it is about herself as She-Hulk that she is addicted to. The sweet resolution to this horror story is she realizes that either way, she is still herself, and regardless of whether she is human or Hulk, she never backs down from a fight. Yay, confidence boosts. What was that? Number 7. All the hate surrounding She-Hulk's Disney Plus series. One of the scariest things in my mind, as well as the silliest, is all the hate surrounding She-Hulk right now. Fortunately, it is being combated by as much love as fans of her comics can muster, as well as a personal Twitter welcome from the man who portrays her cousin himself in the MCU, Mark Ruffalo. But still, there are some people who were next level triggered by Disney's announcement surrounding the She-Hulk series. People are making comments involving how her show will just involve her making sandwiches in the kitchen. And I even read a comment where someone angrily wrote in all caps, "Hulk doesn't need to be a girl," as though they thought Disney was gender swapping the Hulk for the series. Another comment stated, "We have female Thor, female Hulk, what's next, Spider-Woman?" I hope so. I personally love Jessica Drew. These comments make me want to send these ignorant nerds to make me a sandwich in the kitchen while I read them some sensational She-Hulk. I'll share my sandwich with them too. Number 6. Married to Man-Wolf. So, To me, it isn't super scary that she was in fact married to John Jameson, aka Man-Wolf. Just because he's a wolf doesn't mean he doesn't deserve some love, and the two were kind of a cute monster mash pair. The scary part to me about their marriage and love affair was that it was never real. I mean, it was real, they got married, but it only happened because they were both under the influence of Star Fox's power. That's right, he made them feel love for each other and eventually get married. Once She-Hulk finds out about this in She-Hulk Volume 2, the same series in which she and John were actually shown to have fallen in love and get married, she ends up filing for a divorce and annulling their marriage. Could you imagine a world where you were forced to stay with a partner, in fact marry them, but you thought you had wanted to, only to find out that you were somehow manipulated into that? That sounds pretty terrifying to me. Not to mention, as sweet as John can be, he also spent a lot of their time together trying to get Jennifer to give up She-Hulk entirely. Not cool, John. And definitely not cool, Star Fox. Number 5. Star Fox's defense. Even more terrifying is somehow Jennifer ended up as Star Fox's defense lawyer. Granted, this was before she knew she was being manipulated, but really, Jennifer? This case involved a lot of instances of evidence against Star Fox. It's made pretty clear that he was actually manipulating even the court the whole while. You might be thinking, I know what's happening here. When they had the trial later on Titan where She-Hulk found out about her false relationship with John, she was going to find out that Star Fox was manipulating her the whole time. But no, they did not give her an easy way out. She actually discovered that while she had been influenced by Star Fox in regards to her feelings about Man-Wolf, she had not been influenced into defending him or sleeping with him. Yikes! If anything, the way this whole Star Fox sexual assault thing was handled and written is just scary in and of itself. Number 4. Grey She-Hulk. Even though Bruce and Jen are very different kind of Hulks, sometimes their plights are one and the same. After the death of Bruce Banner in the Civil War II event, Jen was shaken to her core and became very connected with her darker side. More specifically, she went grey. If you're familiar with the Hulk but not as familiar with the Hulk family, you may think that doesn't sound so bad. After all, when Bruce typically goes grey, he becomes much more level-headed, smart, like Jen normally is when she's green. So what happens when Jennifer Walters goes grey? Well, she becomes more like Bruce's standard Green Hulk, a monster who is hard to connect with. And trust me when I tell you, this side of her is pretty scary. In Hulk Volume 5, which featured Jennifer Walters as the main character in the absence of Bruce, we get to see her deal with the monster within, a side that is not normally explored with her character. Also, it's just really well written, so yay! Number 3. That time she ripped Vision in half. If you needed more proof that She-Hulk is someone you don't want to mess with, here it is. Before the events of House of M and Avengers Disassembled, She-Hulk is influenced by Scarlet Witch and flies into a rage and becomes the villain for a few issues. By the way, in case you were unaware, the more angry She-Hulk gets, the stronger she gets. She even rips Vision in half. Granted, he's kinda like dead at the time anyways, but still, she rages real hard, knocking down Cap without so much as a second thought. Boom, take that, Cap. Number 2. Survivor of Assault. In the newer Avengers series from 2018, we see She-Hulk wrestle with her appearance in issue 20. In this issue, we see her ugly side fighting her old version, her pinup side. Old She-Hulk berates new She-Hulk for being ugly, a stick in the mud, too serious. The two sides of herself end up getting so heated over the idea of what her identity should be that they devolve to blows over who is right. Jen also opens up about her feelings on being She-Hulk. Yeah, she's had fun and felt confident, and she's looked amazing, but she is fighting for her freedom in this issue to be ugly, because of all the other stuff that she has had to deal with, namely sexual assault. She opens up about unwanted advances and having nude pictures of her published, and laments how her cousin Bruce has always envied her falsely, as although she was admired, she also has had to deal with a lot of sleazeballs groping her, something Bruce never seems to have to deal with. Ladies, in comics, it's hard. Number 1. Her and Bruce hooked up. Yeah, this almost happened in canon in one of the Incredible Hulk annuals, and everyone was pretty shocked. And then it actually happened, on an alternate Earth in Old Man Logan, and everyone was just straight up grossed out. While it isn't shown in the series, it is implied that Jen was the only one left for Bruce to mate with, but that still doesn't really excuse the behavior here. It's also never specified as to whether or not this interaction is consensual, though they have more than one kid together, so I certainly hope so. Ugh. Number 10. Ebony Blade. The Black Knight is nigh immortal when wielding his magic sword. Originally his power was attached to his Ebony Blade, a sword forged by Merlin out of meteorite. In fact, Percy would often pretend to be pretty clueless in order to hide his identity, but would transform whenever he brandished his sword. Not going to lie, I'm excited to see a hero that brings an ancient blade to an alien tech fight. I personally love Thor's weapon Mjolnir and the idea of someone fighting with old school but magic imbued weapons. It just makes me think of more classic mythological or historical tales. The tales that actually inspire even our high-tech heroes, to be honest. And I like when we are able to explore and get down to earth. Beyond that, this sword also comes with a curse that at one point transformed the current Black Knight, Dane Whitman, into a living statue. Number 9. He died. Well, the original Black Knight did. Sir Percy of Scandia was once the Black Knight, and after using the Ebony Blade to fight Mordred, he died. You might be remembering that I mentioned in my last point that he was, nigh immortal when wielding the blade, and you would be right, I did say that. However, Mordred was wielding a sword himself made of the same meteorite, and when Black Knight was stabbed with the blade, it went through even his ebony armor made from the same meteor as well, and he was wounded. How big was this meteor? Just making tons of weapons and armor out of it. Ergo, Percy was nigh invulnerable, but not quite, you see. He died from his injuries. But Merlin enchanted the blade with Percy's spirit, so his legacy would live on and pass down to whomsoever wielded the blade. So, not quite dead. Number 8. Trapped in the 12th century. To some, this may sound like a fantasy, but the 12th century was a pretty gross time, let's be honest. It was a time when many starved and often died of disease or the common cold. This was a time before advance where even if you didn't die in a highway robbery, your end was probably just around the corner, coming to you soon. Where, 30 years old was considered old. Granted, the Black Knight Dane Whitman didn't have to worry about these horrors as much as we would, as he was living in a comic book fantasy and is a superhero, so he kind of has immunity to some of these things. So how did this happen? How did he get to the 12th century? Well, Dane's consciousness was transported back in time after he was seemingly turned into stone by the Enchantress. The Avengers discovered this after trying to transform him back. Dane claimed though that he was good in the 12th century, where he was inhabiting the body of his ancestor Eobar Garrington, and busy protecting the past. The Avengers let him be, and he eventually returned to his own body back in the present, when Eobar's body perished. So, does that mean that Dane is his own ancestor? That's some Back to the Future stuff. Number 7. Villainous Past. Before Dane became the Black Knight, but after Sir Percy, there was Garrett. Nathan Garrett is an interesting fellow. He is a descendant of Percy's, who was a brilliant scientist and geneticist, who stumbled upon the tomb of the Black Knight and took up his mantle. However, he wasn't quite as noble as his ancestor, and he decided to use the powers of the Black Knight and Ebony. However, he wasn't quite as noble as his ancestor, and he decided to use the name of Black Knight and take up a life of crime, using his intellect to build gadgets that would assist him, including a robotic flying horse. Crazy. He was also apparently a communist and a spy for the People's Republic of China, which seems kinda random. In the end, as he lay dying, he repented and confessed everything to his nephew Dane, imploring him to take up the mantle and redeem the Black Knight's name. Dane agreed and his uncle Nathan died. Poetic. Number 6. Gan Yosen. Okay, so this point is mostly scary because it is scary hard to understand. That, and if you imagine being linked to a person in this way, potentially against your will, it doesn't really sound fun. Basically, the Gan Yosen is like a psychic soulmate type bond, and this is how we will probably see Kit Harington's character, the Black Knight, brought into the MCU. Okay, here we go. So, the Black Knight in the comics was for a while linked to Cersei, one of my favorite Eternals, through this bond called the Gan Yosen. The bond was created by Icarus after Dane went all crazy and tried to completely wipe out Cersei because she kinda turned him down for a day. Or not really Dane, but Proctor, who is kind of like a bizarro evil alternate of Dane's. Anyways, Icarus creates a bond between Cersei and Proctor, but this also affects the main continuity Dane from Earth 616. The two have a complex relationship. After the bond between them gets broken, Dane ends up killing Proctor, but Cersei ends up getting injured. Dane feels guilty about the whole thing and travels around the multiverse with Cersei while she heals. Eventually, she feels well enough to return to the modern day main continuity with Dane, but then, after Dane is sent back, appears to change her mind. So yeah, I guess we'll see what the MCU decides to do with that. horrific mess of a comic story. Number 5. Stone Heart. He has a literal stone heart. I'm not making this one up. During the series Captain Britain and MI-13, while returning from a mission where Black Knight went to retrieve the Ebony Blade from Wakanda, it is revealed that his heart is actually made of stone. Also, the Ebony Blade certainly gets lost and moved around a lot later in the comics. It will be interesting to see if Kit Harington's Black Knight is maybe able to hold on to it a little more tightly than his comic book counterpart. Anyways, his squire or steward at the time, Thea, is a doctor whose life he saved, and she berates him for not letting her even speak to Storm during their visit, and for keeping things from her, including the fact that he has a stone heart. She alludes to it as a curse, but the Black Knight claims it was a gift from his ex, Cersei. Ugh, is that really how hearts work? Like, do you feel less if your heart is made of stone? Or do you just die? My money's on dying. Number 4. He went crazy. More recently in the comics, Black Knight was actually driven mad by exposure to the Blade. It was later revealed to him by historian Rebecca Stevens that the Blade has driven everyone that has ever wielded it mad. Based on our understanding so far of the Blade, I'm not quite sure how true that is, and apparently Dane was also skeptical. He dismissed Rebecca's claims, despite the fact that she shared the information along with an offer to help him. Black Knight didn't want to hear it though, probably because he was crazy. Number 3. Blood Wraith. Throughout his time in the comics, Black Knight acquires squires and stewards who aid him on quests. Very medieval times like. One such squire was Sean Dolan. However, during the Black Knight's time serving with the Avengers and assisting them while he was away from his squire, Sean got a hold of the Ebony Blade. Why was it unsupervised? I don't know. The Ebony Blade made him go completely evil and nuts when it harvested the souls of deceased Sloranians, turning Sean into Blood Wraith. Not even the Avengers could stop him. The best Scarlet Witch could do was strengthen Sean's bond to the Blade, trapping him in Slorania. Okay, so maybe Rebecca was onto something. Number 2. Proctor. Ever imagine what would happen if Dane didn't fight so hard against the curse of the Ebony Blade? Well, imagine not, because Proctor is here. Why his name is so different from Dane's, we'll never know. But what we will get to know is what reality would be like if Dane just gave in to all the crazy that the Ebony Blade gives off. Proctor has his own Ebony Blade, and of course it is also very cursed, but this alternate version of the Black Knight just decided to give into it. Fighting does take a lot of work after all. The result was he went completely cuckoo crazy and evil. After being scorned by Cersei, he killed her and went on a plot to kill all other alternate versions of her across the multiverse. This is where the Gan Yosen comes in and everything gets really confusing, but we already explained that, so you get the idea. Number 1. The Curse. Back to the curse of the Ebony Blade that I touched on earlier. After Dane returned back to the present after the death of Eobar in the past, you with me? He discovered that the Blade had become more powerful, but also more cursed. In order to cure the Blade of the blood curse that it had come down with, he was forced to expel Percy's spirit from it, setting it free. Which ultimately sounds like a good move, because trapping a spirit in a sword, even if you're Merlin and it's like for a good cause, still kinda seems like a terrible thing to do to someone. After Percy's spirit was free from the sword, it was cured, until the Submariner Namor got his hands on it and used it to kill his literal monster of a wife at the time. Thanks for that, Namor. The curse then returned and double intensified, corrupting its user Dane. And if you haven't guessed it by this point, the curse doesn't seem to like give up or stay cured, so yeah. Poor Dane. Number 8. Ol' Uncle Nazi. Yitz Perlman was a close family friend and rabbi who had fled Germany with Spectre's family. Oh yeah, Mark is also Jewish. But it is later revealed in a flashback in the comics that Yitz Perlman, who has been a family friend of the Spectre since Elias, Mark's father, was just a kid, is actually not who he appears to be. Mark ends up in an area of the synagogue he is not meant to be in and falls down through a trap door leading into the basement. Further into the basement. He was meant to meet Yitz, who he fondly refers to as Uncle Yitz later in the evening. Yitz is also down in this basement in the dark, and upon Mark stumbling in, decides to reveal his true identity. He lights a match to reveal a bloody corpse hanging from the ceiling and offers Mark the prompt: a rabbi, a Nazi, and a serial killer walk into a bar. Yitz Perlman was actually the adopted identity that allowed Ernst, the man's real name, to escape Germany as Hitler's reign was coming to an end, and avoid prosecution as a Nazi. And as he suggests, he is also a serial killer. This revelation would scar scar Mark for the rest of his life, and leads into our next scary fact. Number 7. Multiple personalities. The traumatic revelation of finding out that his uncle Yitz was actually a Nazi and serial killer ended up traumatizing Mark to the point that he developed a dissociative personality disorder, which, I mean, is fair. If I found out that my uncle was a Nazi and a serial killer, I probably would want to take a break from being myself too. For those who don't know, dissociative personality disorder, also sometimes referred to as dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder, is a condition where the afflicted alternates between at least 2 different personality states. The condition is also usually accompanied by blackouts and gaps in one's memory, meaning you can adopt another personality and go about your life in that separate identity or state, and then potentially forget what you were doing or have done. Pretty spooky stuff. And Mark doesn't just have 2 alternate personalities, no, he is a revolving door of 10 personalities, including Jake Lockley, cab driver, and Stephen Grant, millionaire. The fact that he is also capable of transitioning between them so quickly also makes it hard for him to settle down in life. Number 6. He has a kid. While admittedly having children isn't very scary, having a child while also suffering severely from dissociative identity disorder can be. I also think the premise of having a child and being fully responsible for a life is objectively terrifying, but that's just me. Remember Marlene from the Egyptian expedition gone wrong that strengthened his bond to Khonshu? Her and Mark have an on and off again romance in the comics, kind of to be expected considering their shared trauma. While the two have never quite been able to make it stick due to the fact that Mark's crime-fighting persona Moon Knight means putting Marlene constantly in danger, and the fact that he is constantly jumping from one of his personalities to the next, there is a time when they actually manage to settle down for a while. During this time, the two conceived a child, and Marlene gave birth to a daughter who is named Diatrice in the comics. Diatrice Alron, she took her mother's last name. The really odd and scary thing is that she's not really fully Mark's daughter. At the time that they settled down, Mark was living as his personality Jake Lockley, and it was because he settled into this personality for such a lengthy period that he and Marlene were even able to make their relationship work. So is Diatrice really even Mark's daughter? I don't know. Sounds like she's more Jake's daughter, I guess. Number 5. Khonshu. You might not think the Egyptian god of the moon Khonshu is a particularly frightening figure, especially since Khonshu is the one granting Mark his powers, but is he? Later in the comics, it is revealed that Khonshu seeks to drive Mark insane so that he can use his body as a vessel to enter the realm of the living. While this ends up being untrue, what is implied instead is even more terrifying. It is implied that Khonshu is simply an illusion that was created to help cure Mark. Ultimately, he recognizes that in order to gain control of himself and his personalities, he must accept them. In doing so, he gains control again and regains his sanity. One of those, ooh, it was all a dream type scenarios. Number 4. Morpheus. No, not that Morpheus. We are instead talking about one of Moon Knight's villains, Robert Markham. To really understand the darker side of this character, it's good to get into the mind of those he fights and also the way Mark grapples with his demons. Not just his internal demons either. Robert Markham was suffering from a rare viral disease and sought help. From there he became a patient of Peter Alron Jr., brother of Marlene Alron and son of the original Peter Alron. Sorry if I'm saying this last name really wrong. My apologies. The experimental drug that Peter Jr. prescribes leads to Robert being unable to sleep and developing psionic abilities. Oh, and he also becomes a boogeyman monster looking type with like claw hands. It's creepy. He ends up being thwarted by Moon Knight the first time, but returns to his villainous ways after mutating even further, allowing himself to link his mind with Peter Jr.'s and use it to project nightmares into other people's minds. Hence his name Morpheus, which is actually adopted from Greek mythology, where Morpheus is known as the god of dreams. Not from the Matrix, unfortunately, in case you thought that was where I was going. But oddly enough, the same source that the writers for the Matrix probably were inspired by for their character of the same name. Number 3. Addiction. Like most heroes, he has also suffered from an addiction. His is one that is actually also a huge global issue in the real world currently, an addiction to painkillers. This happened as a result of a battle between him and Bushman that left him crippled with 2 broken knees. Obviously needing the medication while healing, he ended up developing an addiction to them. Like Mark, doesn't have enough issues to worry about. He sees things, has illusions, was friends with a Nazi, and wrestles with multiple personalities, and fights crime on top of that. And then he also has to wrestle with an addiction? Oh, talk about a rough go. Number 2. His brother is a serial killer. Everywhere you look with Moon Knight, there are just serial killers everywhere, and you definitely don't have to look far for this one. Randall Spector is Mark Spector's brother, who after betraying him by killing his girlfriend and getting blown up by Mark with a grenade, became a serial killer of nurses. Oddly specific. He currently goes by the name Shadow Knight, and his costume and look is also quite terrifying as well. Definitely not someone you'd want to meet in a dark alley. He is part of the cult of Khonshu and was granted superhuman strength and durability Brutality by Princess Nephthys, who was also once his lover. Number 1. Brutality. Bushman has obviously been one of Mark's greatest foes throughout the comics, and as a result of such, their fights have been legendary. These fights have also gone to show just how different Mark Spector really is from DC's Batman. Batman can be brutal too, sure, but there's Batman level brutal, and then there's Moon Knight's level of brutal. For an example of just how violent Moon Knight can be, and as an example of how he really sees himself as the one doling out justice, I point you to Moon Knight Volume 5, Issue 2. This is also the fight where Moon Knight shatters both his knees, but even while down he keeps on fighting, and gruesomely too. He manages to cut off Bushman's face using the blade on his crescent moon dart. I don't think I've ever seen Batman quite do that. Number 5. Thea. With Angelina Jolie slated to play Thea in the upcoming film, you may be wanting to know more about her character. Who is Thea? As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the Eternals characters were inspired by Greek and Roman mythology, and Thea is no different. She takes inspiration from Zeus's daughter Athena. In fact, her father, Zuras, even changed her name from Azura to Thea to resemble the character from Greek mythology. She is a strong character who has also been represented in the comics as a caring mother and noble Eternal, who tries to protect the world against Celestials. Her abilities, like most Eternals, are off the charts and include telekinesis, cosmic matter manipulation, flight, super strength, and durability, concussive blasts, healing, and of course, immortality. And that's not even all of them. Number 4. Indestructible. Their immortality knows almost no bounds. I mean, they can die, but to kill an Eternal is like next level challenging. It's so hard you'd probably just give up. In order to destroy an Eternal, you don't just need to kill them. You don't just need to vaporize them. Icarus actually came back from that one. You need to full on eliminate them. The thing about Eternals is they have complete control over their molecular makeup, and are also made up of cosmic energy. So when I say that you would need to eliminate them, what I mean is you would need to scatter them across the galaxy, possibly like galaxies, to fully get rid of them. What happens if you don't end up killing them? They'll just come back. They'll regen and pop right back up. And if you try to kill an Eternal and you fail, you're probably gonna get killed next. And most other types of humans, mutants, heroes can actually die in comics. Well, sort of. I mean, it's still comics, so is every character not kind of immortal? Somewhat? Unless their comics really start to tank. Number 3. They were once human. At least, they thought they were. Sprite is possibly the youngest Eternal in terms of appearance. That is to say, he is a really ancient immortal who is trapped inside the body of a child. Driven to madness by this, he seeks revenge on his fellow Eternals for treating him like a child for so many years, and causes their memories to be altered so that they believe they are humans. His hope was that once they realized who they really were, after working so hard to build their human life, that they would feel intense pain and regret when it came to giving up their human lives and dealing with their true identities, and that the pain they felt would hopefully come somewhat close to what Sprite had felt all these years. Dang, Sprite. That's dark. Number 2. Cersei. Cersei is kind of a big deal in comics because she has also fought alongside the Avengers, stepping in to replace the Forgotten One and becoming a core member through to some of the 90s. She even flirted with Captain America. She also took a break from the heroics in the aftermath of Sprite's trick on all of the Eternals, preferring to continue out her human life as a socialite instead of going back to heroics. Her powers reflect that of Thea's in many ways, also including molecular manipulation and teleportation, but where she really shines is with her ability to produce illusions, even though she's not quite on Sprite's level. She is slated to be played by Gemma Chan. Gemma Chan previously played the role of Minerva in MCU's Captain Marvel film. Number 1. They all died. I know, I said earlier that they were immortal. However, in Avengers Volume 8, things got really dark for the Eternals. We are led to believe they all met their ends fighting one another or just killing themselves. So I guess an efficient way to kill an Eternal is with an Eternal. This happened after the Dark Celestials were revealed to be on their way to Earth. Apparently the Eternals found out that their true purpose was to actually harvest humankind. After being led to believe they were there to protect the humans on Earth and working to do so for thousands of years, this revelation drove them all insane, and they died either killing themselves or one another as a result of their madness. Well, we'll have to wait and see if the MCU decides to incorporate this dark storyline or not. Number 10. His wife died. It wasn't just the fact that she died, it was sort of the way in which she died. Mr. Sinister was once Nathaniel Essex in the 1800s, living as an academic, a doctor, and a student of Darwinism, obsessed with the next step in human evolution. His wife, Rebecca, found out about his experiments on humans in this regard and was shocked. This caused her to go into early labor as she was very pregnant at the time. As a result, the baby was stillborn. She managed to free Dr. Essex's experiments, but unfortunately died as a result of the stress of the whole situation. With her last dying breath, she gave Nathaniel the name he would later take up. You see, he had been about to ally himself with Apocalypse at the time, but Jean Grey warned him of the destruction that would befall the planet if he did, and instead he decided to return to his wife and dedicate himself to his family. All too late, unfortunately. His wife swore she could not forgive him before passing away, calling him utterly and contemptibly sinister. As a result, he would join up with Apocalypse and be transformed, claiming the new name Mr. Sinister. I mean, he is still a doctor, so sort of Dr. Sinister. Number 9 stole a Celestial's powers. At one point, Mr. Sinister ran into Tiamat, who was sleeping, and managed to siphon off some of the Celestial's powers. He used the powers to create an entire city filled with sinister clones, inspired by Victorian London in appearance. As frightening as one Mr. Sinister is, you can imagine how terrifying an entire city comprised of his clones would be. Fortunately, the city was destroyed by the Phoenix Five. Number 8 manipulated Cyclops. Most people are familiar with Mr. Sinister's involvement in the creation of Cable, but for those who aren't, allow me to explain. Mr. Sinister has an unhealthy obsession with Cyclops, believing him to be the perfect specimen. Of course, Sinister has an unhealthy obsession with a lot of things, but his involvement with Scott as a result of his obsession and the Summers line is kind of on a whole other level. Sinister cloned Jean Grey, creating Madeline Pryor, knowing that Scott would end up with Madeline Pryor and that the two of them would have children. And he was right, and Madeline gave birth to a baby named Nathan. Nathan then grew up and ended up becoming Cable. Beyond even just the manipulation of who Cyclops would mate with though, it has also been revealed that Mr. Sinister has been messing with Cyclops' life since he was a child. Sinister experimented on Cyclops when he was just a kid for basically an entire year. He is also the man responsible for the separation of Alex and Scott when their parents died in a plane accident. Number 7 created the Marauders. Well, really, even more shockingly, Gambit kind of created the Marauders, but he did it all for Mr. Sinister. Remember when it was revealed that Gambit had a dark secret and everyone thought it was going to be that he was the Witness and the person who ended up betraying the X-Men? Well, it wasn't that. The secret was that he had worked for Mr. Sinister as a retroactive favor after Mr. Sinister helped him to gain control over his powers by removing a part of his brain. Ugh. Also, now Mr. Sinister has that part of his brain, so yeah. Mr. Sinister had Gambit assemble the Marauders and use them to attack the Morlocks, who he believed were abominations when it came to his pursuit of genetic advancement, and had them hunt down and steal baby Nathan from Madeline Pryor. All sorts of evil stuff. Number 6 influenced the High Evolutionary. In the 1920s, Nathaniel Essex's research would live on to inspire another villain in the making, obsessed with genetics, Herbert Wyndham. Wyndham, fascinated by Essex's research, was inspired to do his own testing, though fortunately not on humans, but still on rats. Still, his work would later be considered to be controversial enough to see him expelled from Oxford University. Wyndham would later go on to become the High Evolutionary. The Evolutionary played a role in the Maximoff twins' troubled past, and helped to transform Jessica Drew into Spider-Woman, and later would also work alongside Mr. Sinister, helping to depower all of mutant kind. Mr. Sinister has a ton of evil students, actually, fun fact, including Dark Beast. Number 5 released the Legacy virus. Okay, so he didn't do it on purpose, but still, Mr. Sinister was the one responsible for releasing the Legacy virus. Strife had created the virus and passed on a canister containing it to Mr. Sinister, claiming that the canister actually contained thousands of years worth of genetic material in regards to the Summers bloodline. Foolishly, Mr. Sinister had the canister opened, only to find it was empty and accidentally released the Legacy virus into the world, so named because it was Strife's legacy gift to the world after his death. Quite the gift. Mr. Sinister then frantically worked to cure it, so it wouldn't kill all of mutant kind. However, he was beaten to the discovery of a cure by Moira McTaggart, who actually was dying as she figured it out, passing the information along to Professor X through his telepathy. Number 4 Miss Sinister. One of the creepiest things about Mr. Sinister is he is nearly immortal due to his obsession with genetics and cloning. He even built a failsafe in regards to his preservation in the event of his demise. He injected one of his test subjects, Claudine Renko, with a virus that upon his death would activate. This ended up transforming her into the perfect female genetic clone of Mr. Sinister. As such, she also became obsessed with manipulating the X-Men and causing harm to innocent life through experimentation. After being stabbed by Dakan for messing with him, she seeks out and traps X-23 in an attempt to transfer her consciousness into Laura's body and escape the overwhelming consciousness of Mr. Sinister, which has been plaguing her mind. Her plot ended up being foiled by Mr. Sinister himself, who invaded X-23's mind and forced her to attack Miss Sinister. X-23 escaped along with Gambit, who was accompanying her at the time, and a girl named Alice, a clone who had actually led them to Miss Sinister. However, Miss Sinister managed to just barely survive this encounter, and so did Mr. Sinister, who had taken possession of the 5th clone of Alice, transferring his consciousness into her. So now we have a creepy, young girl version of Mr. Sinister in this story. Ugh. Number 3. Essex House. An interesting and disturbing Easter egg can be found in Deadpool 2 that is a reference to Mr. Sinister. Did you manage to spot it? The orphanage that Russell and Domino were raised in was called the Essex House of Mutant Rehabilitation. While I don't think Nathaniel Essex would think of abusing mutants for religious reasons, like the headmaster did, Mr. Sinister would definitely have tortured the children there in regards to experimentation and testing. The orphanage is stated as being owned by the Essex Corporation, which has also been referred to in other X-Men films. A corporation that was obsessed with collecting genetic mutant material. How interesting. Mr. Sinister was even rumored to have been the big bad in the film Logan. However, he never appeared there. Guess we'll have to wait and see if he appears in the MCU's version of X-Men? Totally would have made sense that he was behind X-23's cloning and everything, but whatever. Number 2. Experimented on his son. Nathaniel's son died of a natural malady that he was born with. He was malformed and apparently was too weak to live. We later find out that after his son's death, he dug him back up and utilized his recently deceased son's corpse in a series of experiments. The goal of his work was noble, to help prevent the condition his son died from in others, but he still managed to shock his wife to death with this. Beyond that, it's implied that Nathaniel may have experimented on his son while he was alive, trying to cure or fix him of his natural ailment, which, like, sure, he's just trying to be a doctor, but also, like, WTF? That's kind of messed up. Number 1. Worked as a scientist at Auschwitz. Mr. Sinister was actually allied with the Nazis during World War II, unsurprisingly. Shockingly though, he worked as a scientist at Auschwitz, where he was given the right to take anyone from the concentration camp that he so chose. He could even save people who were just about to enter the gas chamber. I use the term save, of course, lightly. What he was really doing was taking people to experiment on, in particular searching for mutants among those trapped in the camp. He was given the nickname Nosferatu, as it was rumored he would give you sweets in exchange for a blood sample. Even German soldiers were afraid of this Mr. Sinister. Number 10. Thanos. So if you're a Marvel fan, you may be aware of all the countless retcons that have existed, but you also might not even be aware of all of them depending on where you jumped into the comics. Retcons seem to happen in the Marvel universe daily. One of my least favorite retcons being that Scarlet Witch is no longer a mutant or Magneto's daughter. To that I say #NotMyWanda. One such retcon that could have been very interesting should the Marvel Cinematic Universe decided to go there involves Thanos. If you are an MCU fan, you know Thanos is a Titan from, well, Titan. But did you know in the comics that he is actually an Eternal? That is right. The comics introduced a retcon after the Eternals became a well-known race that welcomed all Titanians under the Eternal umbrella, which makes Thanos currently what is referred to as a Titan Eternal in comic book canon. But we'll have to wait to see if some flashbacks allow him to be retconned in the MCU when the Eternals take to the silver screen. 9. Subrace. Within the race of the Eternals or group of the Eternals, there are subraces or subgroups. It seems that the MCU Eternals will primarily involve and explore the characters that are part of the Earth Eternals, but it is possible that we may get to explore Titan Eternals, Uranos Eternals, and perhaps even other Eternals, as there have been appearances in the comics of both the Kree and Skull Eternal as well. So who knows what bundle of Eternals we could potentially end up with in the future. All of these races / groups obviously stand to clarify where the Eternals are from, but beyond that there are also like sub races or groups of Eternals, which continue to specify certain regions of a planet those Eternals are from. So yeah, we could get like pretty next level specific with these characters' origins and descriptions if we wanted to. Number 8. Eternals Assemble. While the Avengers have assembled many times throughout comic book history, and by joining together have accomplished many heroic feats, they don't have anything on the Eternals. When the Eternals assemble, they actually have the ability to merge and become the Unimind, a being comprised of at least several Eternals combining all of their abilities, powers, and intelligence. Once they merge together, they transform into light and pure energy, creating the unique Unimind. Kind of like Steven Universe's gems when they merge. Pretty neat and useful, really. Number 7. Who is Allars? So although Thanos is now dead, and many people have speculated that he will not actually get to be classified as an Eternal in the MCU, there is evidence in the film Avengers Infinity War that could support his indoctrination into the world of the Eternals. When Thanos meets Red Skull in his pursuance of the Soul Stone, Red Skull greets him as Thanos, son of Allars. Who is Thanos' father? Mentor. So who is Allars? Allars actually is Mentor, or rather, Allars is his Eternal name, while Mentor is his Titan name. The fact that the MCU decided to refer to Mentor with his Eternal name means that Thanos is more closely connected to the Eternals than we might have thought, and that we could potentially get to see Allars, aka Mentor, join the Eternals' ranks in the film, which would be pretty sweet. Number 6. Celestials. The Eternals are often perceived as being ancient, immortal, and powerful beings in the comics, which might make you think that they are too OP for the cinematic world and could ruin it. To that I say, hold your horses, there are beings that are far more powerful than them in the comics and in the MCU, namely the Celestials. You may have seen them pop up every now and then, but who or what are they? And what do they have to do with the Eternals? Well, they are some of the closest entities to gods and life creators that the Marvel Universe has, which I guess makes the Eternals sort of like demigods? Because they are the ones credited with the creation of the Eternals, and in fact superhuman beings on Earth, and even are credited with the creation of the X gene that gives us mutants. They are older than the Asgardians and have been shown to be literally untouchable by the Eternals in the comics. Now that's some real OP stuff. Number 10. Zombie. Yep, Sabretooth was also part of the Marvel Zombieverse. Though his part was small, he looked equally terrifying in his role. Sabretooth was one of the supervillain zombies who shows up to challenge the few power cosmic zombies over the recently slain body of Galactus. Unfortunately, all we get to see is Sabretooth looking ferocious in a panel, and we know that he likely met his end fighting Wolverine, but we don't even get to see his death. Sadly, it appears to happen off panel. Nah, wanted to see that. Oh well, we gotta see him look scary. So, that's a scary fact. Number 9. Killed his brother. Growing up when Sabretooth's abilities manifested, he was just a kid. It was his brother's birthday and his brother refused to share a slice of pie with him. The two children squabbled, as children are apt to do, and eventually the squabble turned into a fight. He ended up killing his brother, biting open his throat with his teeth as a result of his mutation manifesting. Kinda made him, you know, animalistic and violent. When his mom found the two boys, the color drained from her face, but young Victor assured her that they had only just been playing. Aw, playing to the death though, so not aw. Ugh. Scary. I'll just say scary a bunch of times, then that'll make these facts scary, right? Number 8. Victim of child abuse. Growing up, Sabretooth's father abhorred him for being what he called a beast. A huge part of this was of course a result of Victor, you know, killing his brother. As a result, his father would routinely torture him because of this, keeping him chained up and even pulling his fangs, claiming that he was attempting to save his son from his own uncontrollable animal instincts. Because young Victor boasted of a healing factor, his fangs would always grow back, and his father would therefore always keep pulling them. Ugh, sounds terrible. He tried to persuade his mother to release him from his chained prison in their cellar basement, but she refused, terrified of both her husband and of what her son had become. Number 7. Killed his father. Unsurprisingly, Victor ended up escaping the basement eventually, and he managed this by chewing off his own hand. All those Saw memories coming back to me. After he had successfully broken the chain that was holding on to his other one. He then confronted his mother and father in the house with the pliers that had been used to pull his own teeth. In revenge, he killed his father and then rewarded himself with a slice of pie, running off into the night with his disembodied hand clutched in his other. Every time someone cuts off a hand or a leg or a foot or something, I'm always like, I feel like Saw started a lot of this. I don't know if that's true though. Probably someone else that inspired Saw. Number 6. Brutally killed Wolverine's lover. Sabretooth and Wolverine have seemingly always been villains, but the Those who don't know their history might be wondering exactly why this is. The feud can be linked back to Victor's family. Wolverine was once in love with Victor's sister, Clara, which soured their relationship somewhat. Add in the fact that Wolverine just generally doesn't really like or trust Sabretooth, and you've got some reason why the two tangle up so much. But Sabretooth also started hunting Wolverine after his little brother was killed by Wolverine, his little brother Saul. Victor used to torture Saul every day on his birthday, and when he found out that Logan had taken that from him, he decided to transfer the tradition to him, treating Logan like his little brother and causing him grief every birthday instead. Like a lot of grief, like a lot. The first official birthday surprise that Logan received from Victor was revealed in the X-Men Origins Sabretooth story. Sabretooth raped and killed Silver Fox, Wolverine's lover at the time, and much later in Origins we also find out that beyond being a whole plot, this was part of the ongoing feud between the two mutants. Sabretooth would continue to show up on Wolverine's birthday every year just to beat him up. True story. Number 5. Clones. What's more scary than one Sabretooth? Several of them, of course. During Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 55, it had appeared that Wolverine had killed Sabretooth. Killed him with a blade that would mean that he couldn't regenerate anymore, basically cancelled out his powers. But later on it was established that this actually wasn't Sabretooth at all, but was actually a clone of Victor Creed. Turned out that Romulus, who had created the clone, had not just created one, but had created multiple. Yikes! Later on, Sabretooth would make his triumphant return to the comics and reveal he'd just been biding his time, waiting in the shadows for the opportune time to create more havoc in Wolverine's life. Oh no. But oh, it's true, it's true. You think you kill a guy, turns out you don't, because that's comics. Number 4. His obsession with Wolverine. So, Sabretooth's obsession with Wolverine has now evolved to be about more than just the past that they share. As the comics go on, it kind of gets more and more intense actually. Sabretooth is straight up stalker material when it comes to just how much he longs to be Wolverine's #1 arch nemesis. He's like, you can't have any other arch nemesis, it can only be me. Not only does he find him every year on his birthday and try to kill him, but he also kills those that go after Wolverine to protect what he has labeled as his. Only he can kill Wolverine, I guess. Wolverine is his to torment and no one else's. Aw, how sweet. Victor Creed made sure this was known in issue 10 of the Wolverine series out of 1988. He painfully dispatched a pair of thugs who had threatened Wolverine's life on his birthday, wrapping them up like a birthday present and leaving them with an impromptu birthday card that read, "Nobody kills you but me, especially today." Possessive much? Oh my gosh. Also, I don't know, was that the best present that Wolverine's gotten from Victor Creed? It might have been the best one because I feel like it wasn't like a dead lover or something at least. Number 3. He enjoys killing. One of the scariest things about Sabretooth as a villain is that he thoroughly enjoys his kills, especially the women. It's really twisted. In the last few years of comics, we've seen more of a transition in his character. After the events of Axis, he was one of the few that actually stayed flipped for a while. For 3 years, he worked hard at redeeming himself and becoming a hero. Now he's back to his villainous ways, but it was astonishing to me that this was even possible given just how many people Victor has murdered and how much he thoroughly seems to relish killing. He's often depicted after a kill as being covered in blood and looking like he's having the time of his life. He is the animal instinct, unbidden, unashamed, and unchained incarnate. Number 2. The devil set him loose. So you might now be wondering, but if Sabretooth was good for so long and was on a path of redemption, why did he change? Good question. He did enjoy killing, but he had grown past that in the aftermath of Axis and was ready to try to make amends. During the end of 2017's Weapon X series, however, we find out just how this all shook out and how things sort of got switched back. He had taken over leadership of the Weapon X crew, turning them into sort of anti-heroes. This was after Creed had stepped into Logan's shoes for a while following his apparent death, becoming an Avenger and an X-Man for a time. During his time with Weapon X, he ended up sacrificing himself to bring back his and Mystique's son, Graydon Creed, who had died from hell. But the devil was displeased by this, knowing that Sabretooth would feel justified in what he had done and therefore torturing him in hell would just simply not be as fun. So the devil sent him back to the land of the living, but made one big evil change. He freed Victor of any semblance of morality that he had built, turning him back into a vicious and savage monster. Ooh, you know as well if the devil's like, this is a great idea, that's a scary thing that's happening. If the devil stands by it, it's probably gonna be scary. Number 1. Trapped eternally in Krakoa. During the first meeting of the Quiet Council of Krakoa in House of X, one of the first matters brought up was the judgment of Sabretooth. The Quiet Council was seeking to establish what their laws should be while also deciding what to do with Victor. In the end, they determined that they would abide by 3 major laws: make more mutants, murder no man, human, and to respect the sacred land of Krakoa. As Victor had broken the new laws, Xavier offered him 2 choices: a chance to redeem himself or the option of being made an example of. Victor remained defiant and stubborn in regards to being judged and cursed those of the Quiet Council, swearing that he would kill them all. For this, they decided they had no option but to punish him. His punishment was to remain deep inside Krakoa in a conscious stasis for, well, for forever, or until the Quiet Council felt inspired to give him another chance. This to me is just one of the most terrifying things to have happened to Sabretooth. He's just like snug, deep inside the land of Krakoa, unable to move but still aware, still able to think, alive but unable to do anything with his life. It creeps me out. And who knows when, if ever, we will get to see Sabretooth return again. Though I mean it's comics, so we probably will, but maybe not for a while. Also, that's a creepy way to leave someone. Number 10. Duplicates. When we're talking about duplicates when it comes to Mastermind, we're talking about a few things. Firstly, this is a constant fight tactic of Jason's. He often uses his illusion abilities to create duplicates of himself to trick and confuse his opponents. Imagine thousands of masterminds. That's certainly scarier than one. But there are also just multiple masterminds. What I mean is, there are multiple people who have taken up that evil mantle. There is the AI enemy of Captain Britain known as Mastermind, who can also project holograms and create illusions, but more notably, there are Jason Wyngarde, the original Mastermind's confirmed daughters, Martinique, who goes by Mastermind as well, and Reagan, who goes by Lady Mastermind. Other than the power of numbers, another frightful thing about Jason's daughters are that they are both considered to be more powerful actually than him, or than he was. Cause he dead. Number 9. Leader of the Hellfire Club. Not in the comics, of course, unfortunately. Mastermind had trouble even getting into the Hellfire Club in truth in the comics, but more on that later. However, did you know that there was a popular British TV show in the 1960s called The Avengers? The show was different from the comics as it actually predated Marvel's Avengers team, which legally had to be called Avengers, as the Avengers was already in use by the British television series. The actor that our Jason Wyngarde was inspired by was actually Peter Wyngarde. Peter played the leader of the Hellfire Club in the series, but his most famous role was Detective Jason King from Department S and a self-titled series. Imagine if Mastermind had been the leader of the Hellfire Club in the comics too. I feel like he might have been worse than Sebastian Shaw even. There was even a character in the show named Emma who danced at the Hellfire Club, though she was a spy named Emma Peel, not a telepath named Emma Frost. Also, did you know Hellfire Club is a term for just general, like, sort of gentlemen's clubs? I didn't know that, but I learned that today. Anytime someone would have said Hellfire Club, I'd be like, you mean like in Marvel? But no, Marvel does not own that term. There you go. Number 8. Enjoys the suffering of others. I mean, this isn't surprising to me, but it sure is terrifying how much Jason enjoys the torture and humiliation of other people. Wyngarde helped the Brotherhood and Magneto to take control of the country Santo Marco by creating a massive illusionary army, making the people of the nation believe they had no option but to surrender. When he sees that Magneto believes in harsh punishments locking anyone who attempts to rebel in the dungeon, Mastermind exclaims how much he delights in the way Magneto does things. So, not a villain you'd want to be ensnared by then. Anyone who sides with old school Magneto on the appropriate severity of punishment is not a person you want to run into. Although I guess he could only torture you with illusions, so it's not that bad. He'd just make you think you're in the dungeon. Number 7. Wouldn't take no for an answer. So to be fair, I find this pursuit more gross than scary. Especially because it was the 60s, and this was back when we were first introduced to Wyngarde in regards to continuity. He made his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 4, which is incidentally the first issue in which he started heavily hitting on Scarlet Witch, and in a very rude and demeaning fashion. Like, I know it was the 1960s, but even for the era and for comics, it was really rude. I've read some 1960s comics, and this is like going beyond that. And I believe it was definitely intended to come across that way. Scarlet Witch spurned his advances, but that didn't stop the Mastermind from continuing in his attempts to woo her. In issue 7, he offered the world to her, the illusionary world anyways. Anything that her heart desired, a life of luxury, whatever she wanted via his illusion powers. She once again refused his advances, and he once again refused to take no for an answer and started insulting Magneto and proceeded to assault Scarlet Witch. Yikes! Thankfully, Magneto came in and was just like, I want you to be blindly loyal to me, or blindly obedient, and so he put a stop to that. But also, He's just coming in being crazy. Everyone be blindly obedient to me. I'm Magneto. This is original X-Men. Number 6. Turn to Stone. At one point, the Stranger was invited to join the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in a kind of random turn of events. To impress him, I guess, everyone on the team decided to show off their powers. Toad was leaping, Magneto was meddling things, and Mastermind was illusioning. The Stranger decided to respond by also doing a power flex, enraged by their display, for some reason, I guess because they were kind of torturing him. Unfortunately, Mastermind got the brunt of this rage and was turned to stone by the Stranger. I guess Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch still didn't like Mastermind very much at this point because both powerful mutants kind of just let this happen. Quicksilver just actually remarks on it. He's like, oh no, he's stoned now. Like, you could have stopped that. You're really fast, Quicksilver. But don't worry, Professor Xavier was able to confirm that Wingard was in fact a stone statue, but was also still alive, using his knowledge, his abilities, and a stethoscope, because comics. And Jason would eventually return to his old self. This, by the way, is when he went on a little hiatus from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Which is fair. I feel like if you get turned to stone, it's a good time to maybe take a break from that. Number 5. Can make terrifying illusions. Jason's illusion creating powers allow him to create anything he wishes in illusion form. Though these hallucinations are not physical, they are so mentally believable that it would be hard for a normal human to dismiss them. It's even hard sometimes for superheroes to dismiss these. Not only does the illusion visually appear convincing, but he can also alter your sense of taste, smell, and touch as well when it comes to his illusions. When the Brotherhood of Evil ended up in a fight with the Blob and his team of carnies, Wingard used his powers to make them believe that their hammers were snakes, and that volcanoes were just erupting all around them, with lava blasting out, setting fire to them and the area. The illusions succeeded in terrifying his opponents, but Mastermind became startled when he was flanked by more carnies. The main weakness of Mastermind's illusions are that if he loses focus, they kinda just vanish. Though Scarlet Witch did imply that he couldn't put up illusions in a large enough area to startle everyone that was attacking them, when he definitely has done that before. Like in that thing with Santa Marco, he actually created like a country's wide of illusions, so I don't understand. So I really feel like Jason actually shouldn't have lost this one, but hey. Comics. Number 4. Manipulated a child. One of the seemingly kind but still evil tasks that he completed as a member in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants was rewriting a very young Lorna Dane's memory. Using his powers, he altered her memory so that she would believe her parents died in a freak accident. Later, Longshot tried to make her believe that Magneto was actually the cause of the accident when a grown-up Laura went searching for answers. But in reality, it turned out that little Lorna was actually the cause of the plane crash that killed her parents. Her mother fighting with who she thought had been her biological father caused little Lorna to get stressed, and that led to Lorna's magnetic mutant abilities activating, which caused her to accidentally tear the plane apart. In truth, she was actually Magneto's biological daughter, but he wasn't ready for her yet, so he used Jason's powers to make her forget this. While it seems like a kindness, this revelation would later almost cause Lorna to have a psychotic break. In altering her memory, Wingard caused her a great amount of future pain. Number 3. Enslaved Jean Grey. Sort of. Mastermind wanted to join the Hellfire Club's inner circle. To prove himself, he attempted to recruit Jean Grey as their Black Queen, using his skills to manipulate her, and he appeared to succeed. What he didn't know was that this wasn't exactly Jean Grey, but was in fact the Phoenix, whom he was dealing with, which honestly is more terrifying, even if he only managed to successfully bend the Phoenix to his will temporarily. However, she managed to break his hold on her, freeing Cyclops and helping the other X-Men whom the Hellfire Club held captive to escape, before turning her deadly gaze back to her original captor, Mastermind. Number 2. Driven insane! In fact, Jason's temporary enslavement and manipulation of the Phoenix would unleash the darkness within her, causing her to become Dark Phoenix. And in revenge for his attempt to manipulate him, she shared with him awareness of all the psionic impressions in the cosmos, which drove him insane because his mind couldn't handle it. As a result, Wingard was left in a catatonic state and was admitted to a mental institute. He would spend a few years there but would never be fully the same, haunted by the temporary full awareness of the cosmos that he had experienced and the loss of it. He both wanted it back, but it also drove him crazy, so it's like, whoa. Number 1. Created the Void. In the 2005 New Avengers series, we discovered that Mastermind was was actually the one behind the creation of the Void. I know, what? It turns out that he was hired to tamper with Robert Reynolds' mind, making him scared to use his powers. Basically, he made Robert believe that if he did, the devil would basically attack Earth and everything would go crazy. Hence, Robert became that devil. His personality split and he became his biggest fear, the villain that was the Void, as well as being the Sentry. In the end, this is what drove him to erase his superhero persona from everyone's mind, including his own. In issue 9 of New Avengers, we found out this whole split that Robert suffered from, all his fear, was because of Mastermind. Shocking? Yeah, I know. I love how Mastermind is just more powerful after he died in comics. We just keep learning things about him that he did when he was alive. We're like, what? He did that? That's crazy.
Bring us off in at number 10, what's in a name? We mentioned earlier in our intro that Jack is often referred to as merely werewolf, but there are a few other names that the character has too. Jack's birth name is actually Jacob Rusoff. The Rusoff family has a long line of ancestors impacted by lycanthropy, with the first dating back to 1795 when Gregory Rusoff was mutated into a werewolf by one that had been imprisoned by Dracula himself. More on that in a sec though. Jack's mother Laura had fled after her husband Gregor, a werewolf, had been killed with a silver bullet, and his family driven out of their home in Transylvania. Laura relocated, remarried with Gregor's younger brother Philip, and anglicized their last name. Now unfortunately, only more strife was headed their way. From the publication history side of things, fans were quick to point out that his name, Jack Russell, is a breed of dog. Co-creator Jerry Conway has stated that he can't remember how he came up with the name Jack Russell, leaving many historians to believe that he wasn't making a dog reference consciously. Plus, he had never owned a dog or lived with one in his life, so. Up next, number 9, his ancestors. Let's jump back to Gregory Rusoff for this number. In 1795, Gregory was a regular dude with a wife named Louisa living in Transylvania. When Dracula returned to Transylvania, Gregory refused to acknowledge the vampire's authority, so Dracula, being a petty decided to show him by brutally killing Louisa. In his grief, Gregory ambushed and destroyed Dracula, but in the aftermath he had been mutated by that werewolf Dracula had imprisoned, named Lydia. Gregory would take a second wife, and from there, it's a little hazy as to whether or not his descendants were affected by his lycanthropy genetically. Fast forward to 1930, a descendant of Gregory's, named Gregor, but not to be confused with Jack's father might I add, obtained the Darkhold Scrolls, also known as the Book of Sin, which he bound into a book. Reading about lycanthropy and the scrolls under a full moon triggered the latent genes in his body, and he was transformed into a werewolf. He would go on to kill Jonathan Drew's wife and would be kept imprisoned by Drew and his partner Windham for decades before using the Darkhold to break free. And yes, the Windham of the High Evolutionary fame, in case you're wondering. Moving on to number 8, escaping Transylvania. Decades after that, another Gregor, Jack's father this time, married the former girlfriend of his brother Philip, a woman named Laura who would be Jack's mother. After giving birth to Jack and becoming pregnant with his sister Lisa, lightning struck the castle that they lived in during a full moon and Gregor transformed. He escaped confinement and attacked local villagers and was eventually killed by silver bullets. As we mentioned, Jack's family was forced to move out of Transylvania, including his grandmother, Maria, who was stoned and fled to live with gypsies and never actually met Jack until he was much older. Laura then married Philip, and Jack was 2 at the time of these events. Alright, and at number 7, tragedy strikes. 15 years later, Philip was blackmailed by a criminal organization called the Committee after they learned of Gregor's lycanthropy. Philip meant to pay them off, but got cold feet about it, and the Committee had Laura murdered on Jack's 18th birthday. I mean, the women in this story not getting a lot of help, although, you know, it was the 70s after all. Still, oh. On her deathbed, she told Jack the truth about his real father and made him promise not to harm Philip before passing away. Jack would still blame Philip for a long time for the death of his mother. Now around this time, he would also get into a fight with a motorcycle gang, infecting them with lycanthropy, and eventually decide to hit the road and become a traveler while he struggled internally with the ancient family curse that caused him to turn into a beast. Moving on to number 6, the Comics Code Authority. Let's take a detour from fiction for a second and talk about something in the real world that massively affected not only Werewolf by Night, but the entire horror genre in comic books. Back in 1954, the Comics Code Authority came to be. It was a non-government regulation on comics that publishers had to follow. It was the result of multiple Senate hearings that questioned how harmful the content in comic books were to their young readers. It mainly axed out violence, horror, and anything that could be perceived as queer, gay, or lesbian content. Now, despite not being mandatory in order to sell comics, it was the de facto censorship for the medium in the US at the height of its influence, and advertisers and retailers looked to see the seal of approval on comics that they marketed or sold for reassurance. Whole companies who focus on genres that were typically censored fell apart, and many different storylines and characters were changed dramatically in the Silver Age to accommodate it. Looking at you, Batman. So what does this have to do with Werewolf by Night? Well, prior to that, one of Marvel's predecessors, Atlas Comics, had published Werewolf by Night in 1953 as a 5-page short story, and after the rules of the code were becoming more lax and werewolves were found as acceptable content again, Marvel hopped on that story and made it their own under the suggestion of Stan Lee. While Werewolf at Night has received praise and earned the adoration of many fans, many horror titles find it difficult to compete with the bigger superhero titles that publishers boast. And prior to the Comics Code, horror comics were all the rage. So one can't help but wonder what kind of success Jack Russell could have had if the censorship laws of the past had been different. Moving on to number 5, the Darkhold Obsession. Jack has killed. He is a werewolf after all. Now, after hitting the road, he would spend the next several years of his life transforming into a werewolf during the 3 nights of the full moon. Eventually, he was kidnapped by a couple named Nathan and Agatha Timley, who would tell him about the Darkhold, and Jack, in his werewolf form, killed them. Sneaking into his ancestor's castle, which Philip had sold, he stole the Darkhold and would eventually translate it, although it was destroyed, thus beginning Jack's quest to learn more about his past and the Darkhold. He teamed up with the sorceress Taboo and managed to find another copy of it, which luckily his ancestor Gregor had copied into a diary. But this was lost after battling Dracula in the Alps. What would follow were a series of adventures in which he would cross paths with other horror comic icons, the likes of Frankenstein's monster, the Jekyll and Hyde inspired Deprave, and Morpheus the Living Vampire. Speaking of, moving on to number 4, Morpheus the Living Vampire. So Jack has rubbed shoulders with another major horror icon in Marvel's roster, Morpheus the Living Vampire. Not only have the two duked it out over the years, but Jack actually appeared as a supporting character in Morpheus' solo series from 1993 to 1995. The two would actually work together when Morpheus formed a new iteration of the Midnight Suns team, which also had Damien Hellstrom, Jennifer Kale, and Man-Thing as members during Marvel Zombies 4 in 2009. The group, inoculated by a zombie virus vaccine created by Morpheus, would investigate a cruise ship attacked by zombie fishmen, unraveling a more complex plan that involved Dormammu. Coming in at number 3, his powers. Jack Russell's powers differ from your typical werewolf. While he does transform uncontrollably when a full moon is out, the character has gained the ability to transform at will, voluntarily outside of the moon cycle, in which he retains his human intellect and general control. This control has fluctuated over the years. In 2004, he was really struggling to control himself, locking himself up in cages and receiving glimpses of hell while he shapeshifted. In his werewolf form, Jack stands an impressive 7 feet tall and gains superhuman strength, speed, stamina, durability, agility, and reflexes. His superhuman sense of smell carries over into his human form when he is not transformed. And like all other werewolves, he is next to impossible to kill but is very susceptible to silver, which has inherent mystical purity. Up next, number 2, the MCU. Jack Russell's appearances have been a bit more spotty in recent times. He was largely inactive during the 80s, and in the late 90s, Volume 2 of his solo series performed poorly and was cancelled. And after the events of Civil War II, Jack Russell hasn't really been around a whole lot. To be fair, he wasn't around a whole lot prior to Civil War II either. He had become a member of the Legion of Monsters alongside the Man-Thing and Living Mummy, who teamed up with the Punisher to protect an underground city home to a bunch of innocent sentient monsters. There has been a bunch of cameos from Jack in other stories, including Civil War II, where Deadpool shot him with a blunderbuss after discovering Jack had an affair with his wife Shikla. But the character is far from entering into obscurity. Reports are he'll be getting the MCU treatment. Many have theorized that the cinematic adaptation that he will be tied to is the Moon Knight feature film, which is in the works. Moon Knight actually debuted in Werewolf by Night issue 32. Plus, Jack has a history with Blade and Dracula, the former having his own feature film slated to come out in the MCU as well. And finally, in at number 1, Tyr St. Clair. One of the many cameos Werewolf at Night has made after that little stint with the Punisher was in X Factor. After he was drawn to their base X Factor investigations when Wolfsbane gave birth to her child. The child, who would become known as Tyr St. Clair later on, was a cub that prior to birth was hunted down by many supernatural figures, and with the help of Russell, Wolfsbane and the child were able to escape capture and death. Tyr was fathered by an Asgardian wolf prince. When he was born, Wolfsbane rejected him, seeing that he was feral and vicious, attacking Agamemnon, and his existence went against her religious beliefs. After Tyr attacked them, Banshee used her sonic scream on the cub, sending him flying out of the house and into a nearby forest. Hela, who had been tracking the child, tried to claim Tyr but was stopped by other monsters and gods wanting to do the same. So the child hid in a cave. Jack would find the cub and decide to raise him as his own. The two would be pursued by Darwin all across the country until Wolfsbane, Shatterstar, and Richter were able to find them and aid them. Unfortunately, this has a sad ending. Tyr was eventually seemingly killed off in X Factor issue 256 in 2013, and hasn't made an appearance since.
Number 10. Grim Knight. The origin story of the Grim Knight is similar to the Batman of Prime Earth, but is warped. Instead of the Dark Knight, we know him as the Grim Knight, because this Batman is not afraid to use guns. So yes, you could say he's similar to the OG Batman from the 40s, but he is also far more brutal and ruthless. This version of Batman ended up killing Joe Chill when he was just a child. After Chill shot his parents, he stumbled away in the darkness, but Chill tripped and dropped his gun and Martha Wayne's necklace. While he searched for the necklace in the dark, a young Bruce grabbed the gun and aimed it at Chill, killing him in cold blood with tears in his eyes. This set Bruce down the path of believing that killing was the best way to deal with criminals that opposed justice. This version of Bruce was still inspired by a bat crashing through his window to become Batman, but he also shot that bat when it did. Number 9. Death of Superman. After Superman dies at the hands of Doomsday, Lois becomes depressed and jaded, believing that the world failed Clark. She ends up merging with the Eradicator, who claims it failed in its mission to resurrect the fallen Superman, and instead bonds with Lois so that she can succeed where she believes other heroes have failed, fighting on in Clark's name. However, Lois goes too far compared to Superman, killing those who oppose her, villains and heroes alike. Superman returns, but only lives long enough to express his disappointment and disgust in what Lois Lane has become before he is killed by Cyborg Superman. Super depressing story. Number 8. The Merciless. Like the Earth-12 belonging to the non-dark multiverse, on Earth-12, Batman and Wonder Woman are also in a romantic relationship together. They fight side by side in a war that threatens to engulf the entire population of Earth against the god of war, Ares. After countless have died and they're basically the only two left standing, they finally succeed, but Batman feels in order to protect the world, he should be the one to wield Ares' power. Knowing that Wonder Woman herself would not take Ares' helmet, and with it his power, and that she would actually not allow Bruce to take it for fear of it corrupting him, Batman sees no other choice but to kill Diana. He takes Ares' helmet for himself and fights on, claiming to fight in honor and in memory of the fallen warrior and his love, Wonder Woman. Number 7. Blackest Night. This is a wild story wherein Sinestro never shared the powers of the White Lantern. Here, Necron, who speaks through Darkseid, attempts to obliterate the entire universe. Sinestro is both Black and White Lantern, known as the Limbo Lantern, and sees only one way to save the universe, by creating a new universe in Dove's image, by plugging her into the source. This almost works, except at the last minute their ally, Mr. Miracle's conviction wavers, and he ends up killing Dove to avoid creating and living in a world without his wife Barda. Instead, Sinestro is forced to use the only teammate he has left, Lobo, to create a new universe. Yeah. Slim pickings, I guess. The world instead is made in Lobo's image, who taps into the source, eliminating all Black Lanterns and restarting a dark and more grotesque looking world, which Sinestro remains trapped in, unable to leave due to Tempest preventing him from doing so. That sucks. Number 6. The Devastator. The Devastator is another twisted version of Bruce Wayne who was pushed too far. For mysterious reasons that remain unknown, the Superman of the Devastator's dark universe randomly underwent a change that caused him to go on a full-out rampage, killing everyone. Batman was one of the last few left to try and stop him, attempting to do so with a kryptonite spear. After Superman blasts off Batman's arm, however, he is driven to desperate measures. Batman is forced to activate his own version of the Doomsday virus, which takes over his body and transforms him into a Doomsday-like creature, becoming the Devastator. Although he fails in saving his world, he succeeds in killing the Superman of his universe, before heading out to try and save other alternate Earths by infecting them with the virus in order to protect them from their world Superman. Although, you know, they never really asked for that, so it's pretty horrifying. Number 5. Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. He can control his victim's mind if he ends up acquiring his victim's blood. And that isn't just all. Getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. In the current continuity, Brother Blood can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. Ew. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you are in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means you have to deal with all his servants who have already done so. He also happens to be a weirdly likable likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract new willing followers to his cause. Currently in the comics, Brother Blood is even using his charismatic personality to present himself as a now redeemed villain, intent on helping to find a new planet for those who join his cause to live on in response to the global climate crisis that the world is experiencing. But we'll have to wait and see if this redemption is actually the real deal or not. I'm not buying it so far, and I'm really excited for when Brother Blood is like, I am a villain the whole time I've been a villain. Yes. Number 4. Darkseid. Darkseid has to be one of the most fearsome villains out there. He is not only the ruler of Apocalypse with an army at his back, but he also has some of the most ruthless, cruel, and elite soldiers in the cosmos. Darkseid has fought and defeated many heroes in the past, even seemingly at one point permanently defeating Batman, although Batman would return and be revealed to have not been permanently taken out actually. Darkseid is terrifying because he is inevitable, best summed up by 2 words. Darkseid is. Number 3. Perpetua. Perpetua is an old evil, but one that we didn't know of in the comics until 2018, when she was first introduced in Justice League Volume 4, issue number 8. Perpetua quickly became known as one of the greatest evils the universe or multiverse had ever known. She was the creator basically of all things, and the mother to the Anti-Monitor, World Forger, and Over-Monitor. She pretty much embodies the dark multiverse in a way. Well, her, I guess, and the Batman Who Laughs, who comes from the dark multiverse. She is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse, and is considered an Omega level cosmic entity, basically an evil goddess who is fueled by crisis energy and aims to use it to destroy and rebuild the entire multiverse. Number 2. Batman Who Laughs. Although he may currently be defeated in the comics, make no mistake that the Batman Who Laughs remains one of the most terrifying characters to come out of DC Comics' dark multiverse. Batman Who Laughs hails from the Earth of -22 and is a version of Bruce Wayne who ended up being turned insane by exposure to the Joker venom. This version of Bruce killed all of his fellow Bat family members except for Damian, who he instead recruited to join him. Batman Who Laughs would serve Barbados, the Bat God, and go on to assemble an army of Dark Knights for him from across the dark multiverse to join him in reshaping and conquering all of reality. From there, he would ally himself with Perpetua and would even go on to betray her, revealing the whole time that he sought to conquer the multiverse himself so he might reshape it in his own image, becoming one of the most feared villains in all of DC's history. Number 1. Upside Down Man. While not officially stated as such, the Upside Down Man is kind of godlike in his appearance in DC Comics. He is the dark reflection of Hecate, who is quite dark herself, so that is honestly saying something. And she is considered to be a goddess and powerful witch, so I think we can consider him to be at a god level, and of course Upside Down Man is also a powerful magic user who seeks to invade and devour the Prime Earth reality after being trapped for millennia in the dark multiverse with the other kind, banished there by Hecate, or Hecate, whatever you prefer.
Number 10. Mazaz. On Earth 3, things are kind of backwards. Power and strength reign supreme, and those who are superheroes and villains in the Prime Universe are supervillains and heroes respectively in Earth 3. Alexander Luthor, for example, was the most powerful superhero on Earth, going by the name Mazaz, which is Shazam backwards. Now, he's technically a good guy, but his power is what I find truly terrifying. Mazaz has the ability to absorb the powers of any superpowered being that he took the life of through his lightning. Using this, he gained all the powers of Bizarro, including invulnerability, self-sustenance, Arctic vision, flame breath, and kryptonite immunity. He got the powers of the Firestorm Matrix from Deathstorm, which are too many to list, the Speed Force abilities from Johnny Quick, and the powers of Hawkwing. While the characters he fought were arguably worse than him, no one from Earth 3 is really good, and he is absolutely terrifying, when he is powered up of course. Number 9. Bump in the Night. For starters, DC's House of Horror is basically a collection of short stories featuring different characters. They are all equally interesting and horror themed. The possession of Billy Batson and Last Laugh stories are particularly interesting, but for today's video, I think I want to talk about the very first one. Bump in the Night. This short story follows Martha Kent on the night Kal-El arrives on Earth. Jonathan Kent has gone out to explore what exactly caused a big bang and a trail of smoke on the Kent's farm, but he isn't coming back. As Martha worries about where her husband has gone to, she goes back inside the house, but Martha starts hearing bumping and thumping coming from upstairs in the house. Suddenly, a demonic humanoid child crashes through the ceiling and begins attacking her. She tries to run to the barn, but fiery beams of energy fire from the creature creature blowing up the barn. She takes refuge in her truck only for the creature to land on the hood, shrieking. It throws the truck across the yard and Martha gets out wounded only for the truck to explode. The creature flies away with the symbol of an S emblazoned on his chest. If you are looking for comic book content, this is the place to find it, so hit us with a subscribe to stay inundated with tons of videos about all your favorite heroes. Thank you. Number 8. Speed Demon from the Amalgam Universe. The Amalgam Universe, where the worlds of Marvel and DC collide, is honestly an amazing place. We get all kinds of crazy mashups like Wolverine and Batman, but while that is incredibly awesome, the one I think may be better for this list would be Blaze Allen, the Speed Demon, or basically the Flash mashed together with Ghost Rider. Yes, it's as crazy as it sounds, and honestly, it's more totally awesome than it is scary, but Ghost Rider is already fast with his motorcycle, so imagine if he didn't even need that. The best part of this is that his cousin, Wally West, becomes another version of Speed Demon, and the two of them work together. It's not something that I thought I needed, but I absolutely did need it. Number 7. Witch-marked Wonder Woman. Years ago, a 12-year-old Diana Prince came upon a ritual being performed at a crossroads in Themyscira to the goddess of magic and witches, Hecate, by her followers. Diana gets grabbed by the followers and Hecate brands her with a witch mark, and she vowed to Hippolyta that one day she would return to use her witch mark to take over the world. Once things start popping off in the 2018 Witching Hour crossover, Earth's magic is beginning to disappear and Hecate is obviously to blame. Hecate activates her witch mark, 5 women who have been branded, including Diana. The witch marked power Diana possesses could rip the world apart and tear holes in reality. It's honestly very insane, and it only gets crazier as she gains the power of the other witch marked. Now I glossed over quite a bit for the sake of time, so I suggest you read the story. Number 6. Dawnbreaker. Now this is like a mix of evil Green Lantern and evil Bruce Wayne. Technically, it's just Bruce Wayne, but after the passing of his parents that fateful night, the young Bruce Wayne comes into possession of a Green Lantern ring. We have seen Bruce Wayne wield a Green Lantern ring before, but this is the dark multiverse. Bruce has an unbelievably strong will, and using his powerful will, he is able to override the programming of the Lantern ring, allowing him to use it to take lives. He creates monstrously terrifying green-like constructs and uses them to not just ruthlessly battle criminals, but anyone who stands in his way, including James Gordon, other Green Lanterns, and the Guardians of the Universe. Number 5. Pig. Professor Pig is a villain that came to be during a time when Batman stories were becoming incredibly dark, and Pig himself has to be one of the darkest villains of that era. His methods completely disgust the Dark Knight. He looks like a character straight out of a horror or slasher movie, and his obsession with physical perfection, like in the myth of Pygmalion, became part of the reason he surgically mutilates his victims, turning them into his mind-controlled servants called Dolotrons. If his crimes weren't horrifying enough, then just look at him. Yeah. Get out of my nightmares, thank you. Bye. Number 4. Scarecrow. With Scarecrow, fear is the name of the game. I don't believe Batman is actually scared of Scarecrow himself, but Scarecrow has used his fear toxin to debilitate and send the Dark Knight running on multiple occasions, and that makes him a unique foe that puts Batman in a position he doesn't often find himself in. Batman is a physical powerhouse with a mind that is exceedingly sharp, but his mind is also partially his biggest weakness because he has some serious psychological issues, and Scarecrow's whole shtick is manipulating that kind of thing. When Scarecrow pops up on the scene, the Dark Knight knows that something terrifying is coming his way. Number 3. The Court of Owls. Probably the oldest, most secretive, and most profitable group in Gotham City's underworld. When Bruce Wayne became a threat to them, they put Batman through one hell of a psychological ringer, and possibly one of the darkest Batman stories ever. He gets trapped in a huge Court of Owls maze underneath Gotham City, and trying to make his way through it, Batman goes through physical and psychological tests that nearly break the Dark Knight. But the court has so many feathers in all areas of Gotham and Bruce Wayne's own life. They may have even had a hand in the passing of his parents. Possibly. And we haven't even started talking about the Talons, a group of brainwashed and undead robot-like assassins. The combo of psychological warfare and the deadly Talons nearly brought Bruce Wayne to the pearly gates. Number 2. Bane. His name says it all, as Bane has been the bane of Batman on multiple occasions. The Bane we saw in the Dark Knight Rises movie was fantastic, and he absolutely instilled fear in Batman, but the comic version of that same story goes to a whole other another level. With his master plan being even more well thought out and damaging to Batman, he unleashed Arkham Asylum on Gotham, putting Batman on the ropes as he has to chase down all the escaped criminals. Bane studied Batman. He utilizes his own weaknesses and completely destroys Batman, breaking his back in one of the most infamous comic book moments ever. More recently though, Bane brought Batman even lower than when he broke his spine because he broke Bruce's heart by snapping the neck of Alfred Pennyworth. Any battle Batman has fought against Bane has been with the help of his allies, and that's because Batman knows that he can't take on Bane alone. Number 1. The Joker. I think if there is one person who scares Batman more than anyone, it's gotta be the Joker. They have had such a long and complex history with each other, and I think because of that, and the Joker's obsession with the Bat, Joker knows all the ways to mess with Batman, and he's constantly coming up with new ones. He will go after anyone to get at Batman, and he will go through anyone just for the fun of it. He's unpredictable. Batman never knows for sure where he will strike and what he will do unless the Joker wants Batman to know. Everything is a game that he knows the rules to. The other thing about Joker is that he would never actually take the Dark Knight's life. In fact, I feel like he would probably destroy anyone who tries to. This just makes him more terrifying as he simply wants to be a constant cause of fear and anxiety for the Dark Knight, and he is.
In at number 10, the nail. As the title suggests, it's literally a nail that shatters the potential future for Superman, and if you're a fan of The Last Son of Krypton, then this Elseworlds story is a must read. 24 years in the past, a flat tire caused by a nail in the truck of Jonathan and Martha Kent stopped them from ever discovering that Kryptonian spaceship with baby Clark inside. As such, the present day team only consists of Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Hawkwoman, The Atom, Martian Manhunter, and the Green Lantern. A lot goes down without Superman being there to carry most of the team. I mean, the Joker lets out prisoners in Arkham Asylum with these energy generating gauntlets that he also used to trap Batman and kill both Robin and Batgirl. Wonder Woman becomes not so wonderful when she's framed for destroying the White House, which leads to rioting, and this outbreak and disorder and chaos ultimately leads to Lex Luthor controlling the United States and using flying robots to enforce his laws. So if you're a fan of the Justice League, you should definitely read this one because it's a whole new thing without Superman. The whole team dynamic changes to the point where Green Lantern is the strongest hero.
Moving on to number 9, we've got Speeding Bullet. This DC Elseworlds story explores the idea of what the DC world would look like if Superman never landed in Kansas, but rather landed in Gotham. So as such, he would be plucked up and raised by Thomas and Martha Wayne instead of John and Martha Kent. I know, 2 Marthas, but hey, if you can put that aside for a moment to embrace this bulletproof Batman, then you'll realize how cool the story is. However, even with this new Bruce Wayne Kal-El hybrid, the Bat's parents are still fatally killed. Unfortunately, that's usually their fate in these storylines. Although it's what also leads to this universe's Bruce Wayne to discover his supernatural abilities and decides to use them to fight crime as the Batman. He's so shocked by his parents being killed that he actually blasts the criminal with his laser eyes, which is just so satisfying. So if you've ever said to yourself, man, how cool would it be if Batman had superpowers? Well, you're in luck, my friend, because Speeding Bullets is all that and more.
In at number 8, Red Rain. The story of Dracula has been used many times in the past by both Marvel and DC Comics, but Red Rain took things to a whole new level of creepy vampire stories. In this Batman Elseworlds tale, we see the Dark Knight defending Gotham from the Lord of the Vampires. What a cool name. Ultimately, Batman becomes a vampire as well, but we feel like that almost makes sense for his character. The repercussions of such a dark Batman storyline leads to a tragic telling of Gotham's mightiest heroes and villains. Plus, the story for this DC Elseworlds comic isn't the only reason why we encourage you to read it. The artwork is absolutely unparalleled and has been said that it's the eeriest Batman art to date. So whether you're a longtime fan of the dark versions of the Bat, or if you just enjoy scary stories in general, Red Rain is a must read.
Moving on to number 7, Red Sun. Superman Red Sun was a 3-part miniseries published in 2003 and begins with the premise of what if Superman had been raised in the Soviet Union. When Kal-El's spacecraft lands on a Ukrainian farm instead of in Kansas, we see a drastically dark transformation of the Superman we know and love. He goes from fighting for truth and justice to being described as the champion of the common worker who fights a never-ending battle for Stalin, socialism, and the international expansion of the Warsaw Pact. Yikes. The writers make it very clear that even the last son of Krypton everyone is not immune to nationalism. This scary story shows just how easily the nurturing in a particular area of the world at a particular time in history could radicalize even the noblest amongst us. The plot uses the real history of Soviet Russia post-World War II, bringing to life the perspective from America's opposition and dropping Superman into the mix of it all.
In at number 6, Justice Riders. If you're a fan of the HBO show Westworld and comic books as well, Justice Riders is a must-read for you. Although admittedly it has nothing to do with the show Westworld and precedes its time, it is an exploration of the Justice League as heroes in the wild, wild west. The excellent thing with this storyline is that it never depends on Superman or Batman to make things exciting. As you can tell from our last few points, much of the DC Elseworld usually has a prime focus on either Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent in their alternate forms. However, for this one, it's a world in which Wonder Woman, Flash, and Martian Manhunter trade in their outfits for a more cowboy-style appearance. Never has Wonder Woman's lasso made more sense than in this storyline. It's truly a breath of fresh air if you're growing tired of all the Batman and Superman-based stories.
Number 5, Dr. Death. Now, if that name doesn't already scare you, then hold on to your hats because this villain is truly something. Originally a scientist working for Wayne Enterprises, Dr. Carl Helfern was working on a nanomedicine to try and create a serum to make human bones harden upon impact to prevent breakage. Unfortunately, this project failed and was a large reason that led to Helfern's slow descent into insanity, the other reasons being his son's death and the loss of his job at Wayne Enterprises. Thanks to a later partnership with Edward Nygma, a breakthrough was discovered, and that got the entire process working again and set him on his path down to his villainous side. With the success of his formula, Helfern injected it into himself, granting him superhuman strength and a regeneration ability. Eventually taking the name Dr. Death, Helfern kills his research group by injecting them with the failed formula which causes their bone to grow uncontrollably and then rip them apart from the inside out. Dr. Death was eventually and thankfully stopped by Batman, who incapacitated the villain by breaking his bones in such a way that they would grow back irregularly. The sheer pressure and uncomfortability of his new physique led to Helfern's death, as his struggle against his own skeleton caused his skull to cave in and crush his brains. Number 4, Crib. Now, despite sounding like a lovely place to keep your baby, this member of the Sinestro Corp is far from that. She targets Green Lantern members who have recently had children, then she'll secrete a poison liquid from her breast to subdue their parents, and then have them watch with their dying breaths as she takes their children and tosses them into her crib-like hunchback. As the parents die, she leaves them claiming she'll raise them as her own as orphans of the Green Lantern Corps. Now, not only is that terrifying, but it's also never really explained why, which, the mystery in that just makes it all the more unsettling. Thankfully, Crib is subdued by Kyle Rayner and is sent to Zamaron to have the Zamarans rehabilitate her. However, it's confirmed later that the rehabilitation technique does not really work on her at all. I guess some aliens just can't be helped. Number 3, Black Hand. William Hand, aka Black Hand, was chosen to be the physical embodiment of death by Guardian Scar, and after killing himself and becoming reanimated, he becomes the leader of the Black Lantern Corps during the Blackest Night. See, I told you we'd circle back. During the Blackest Night, Hand murders each member of his family before killing himself and receiving the Black Lantern ring. With this ring, Black Hand was able to reanimate some of DC's most famous and powerful heroes such as Batman and Superman and so many more. Alongside Necron, Black Hand battles against the heroes of Earth and the Lantern Corps. As stated before, Hand is defeated by Hal Jordan and the White Lanterns after it is revealed that he is Necron's link to the living plane. After he's brought back to life and Necron's defeated, he is then taken by the Indigo tribe, very dazed and confused, and they're set on helping him alter his worldviews, and it seems like it worked. Number 2, Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. Now, this brilliant psychologist turned supervillain is one of the most terrifying and layered villains in the DC universe. Crane lost his credibility as a psychologist after an experiment gone wrong when he took everything a little bit too far, and then that began his descent into madness. Taking up the name Scarecrow, he uses his immense knowledge of fear and anxiety to mess with his victims and seals the deal with his infamous fear toxin to torture them. When inhaled, this toxin forces the victim to hallucinate and imagine their own worst fear as if it was reality. Just the thought of that completely terrifies me, and that's why I placed him so high on this list. I can't even think about it. And finally, number 1, the Joker. You probably guessed it, but obviously the most terrifying DC villain in my opinion is the Joker. The insane clown prince of crime has been around since the beginning of Batman and is still his arch nemesis. He commits crime for no reason other than his desire to show people how meaningless life is through pain, death, and his signature methods of torture. Constantly flipping between a harmless trickster and a mass murderer, the Joker's mindset is impossible to pinpoint, which makes him all the more terrifying. He seemingly has no morals, willing to go as far as killing Robin, crippling Batgirl, and doing whatever it takes to get the job done, even if it means losing someone on his side. Although there's a lot of mystery around his origins, it is known that he is the way he is because of a chemical accident that ruined his body and mind. Now, despite the Joker being such a prominent villain in the Batman universe, there's so little known about him, and when new information pops up, up about him, it just makes him all the more twisted and terrifying. Look, I'm all for practical jokes and committing to a bit, but he just takes it way too far.
Number 10. Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a mass taker of lives who served time at Arkham Asylum. She appears to not have any skin of her own, with muscle tissue fully exposed, making her one of the most frightening villains to look at on our list, that is for sure. Instead of wearing her own skin, she covets the skin and lives of others. While she doesn't appear to have any specific superpowers, it has been implied that she might be capable of shapeshifting. She often gets to know her victims before taking their lives and adopting their identities, sometimes even wearing their preserved skin as a suit. Ew. Instead of simply using makeup to disguise herself. I mean, honestly, I don't think you should be putting makeup on exposed muscle tissue anyways. That seems like a good way to, I don't know, get an infection or something. I don't even know how Jane Doe has lived like this actually, if she really is as she appears to be. Even with her not wearing makeup and just wearing, I guess, skin suits. I don't know, it still seems like it shouldn't be possible, especially if she doesn't have powers. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Zonas. You might know about Darkseid, who belongs to the new gods, but do you know about Zonas, who belongs to the old gods? After all, for there to be new gods, there have to have been old gods, right? Zonas is one of the old gods and is in fact believed to have been the last old god. He was known as the god of evil, or Yuga Khan. At one point he wielded anti-life, claiming that it was what allowed him to resurrect the old gods, and he is believed to be the original being to first wield Omega Beams. Zonas ended up being trapped in the source, and even after escaping the prison and attempting to destroy all of creation, was defeated and imprisoned there once again. Number 8. Grail. Grail is the villainous daughter of Darkseid, who also acts as an opposing force to Wonder Woman. She was kind of born to be Diana's rival, really. The two women were born at exactly the same time, and it was prophesied that Grail, the daughter of Darkseid and Myrna, would bring about much destruction. As such, she was almost killed as soon as she was born, but her mother protected her. She proved almost right away in the comics that she was a new villain worthy of our time when she made easy work of the Justice League. She and Diana ended up facing off shortly thereafter, with Grail immediately coming across as a promising and deadly new foe. Number 7. Hush. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years, and gotten under Batman's skin many times. And Catwoman's skin, literally in this case, when he ended up stealing her actual beating heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and the strength to match even Batman himself, as well as the cunning. In fact, in some cases, he might come across as even more cunning than Batman. He has taken Batman in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into action motion outlandish plots like when he impersonated Bruce Wayne in an attempt to steal his life. Number 6. Granny Goodness. Her name might not make her sound terrifying, but Granny Goodness is not even close to as sweet as her name sounds. She became a trainer of Darkseid's soldiers after impressing him when she herself was selected to train and become one of his elite hounds. Those out there who are fans of Kingsman may find the story of how she was trained pretty familiar. During her training regimen, she was given a dog to train who stayed with her and progressed alongside her. Think you know where this is going? After bonding with the loyal doggo, who she named Mercy, she was later instructed to dispose of the dog. Goodness refused and instead disposed of her trainer. When Darkseid asked why she had done this, she revealed that Mercy was actually worth more than her trainer had been to Darkseid, as she had trained the dog to not only be loyal to her, but to Darkseid above her. Darkseid tested this theory by, tragically, ordering Mercy to attack and take out Goodness, and was impressed when he found the dog indeed obeyed him. Goodness then was forced to actually dispose of Mercy, but this act would inspire Darkseid to shape and use Granny Goodness as his most reliable trainer and recruiter of soldiers. That's one haunting origin story. Number 5. Infinite Crisis. In the dark multiverse, Ted Kord is not killed by Maxwell Lord. Instead, Ted pretends to agree to join Lord in cleaning house when it comes to his plans for Checkmate, but he betrays Lord and kills him. Brother Eye threatens to push on with the OMAC project, but Kord offers that he could help to guide Brother Eye and take Maxwell Lord's place. Help Brother Eye save and protect the planet as Lord had promised Brother would. Ted ends up attempting to recruit Booster Gold to help him with Brother Eye, but Booster isn't so sure about his friend's plan. In the end, he teams up with Superboy Prime, who has been plotting with Alexander Luthor of Earth 3 to create a perfect world in the main continuity, but Luthor betrays him. Superboy and Blue Beetle, who's now directly connected to the Brother Eye, end up teaming up. They end up attempting to take out 50% of Earth's superhero population as recommended by Brother Eye, but in the end they're forced to eliminate or assimilate all of the superhero populace, who obviously are like, no, you can't just kill us, with Ted Kord sacrificing his humanity in order to completely demolish all of that superhero threat. Number 4. The Murder Machine. After the death of Alfred, Batman in his grief seeks to create an AI in Alfred's image and employs the help of Cyborg. Bruce calls the project the Alfred Protocol. Alfred Protocol is also programmed to act as Bruce's infallible bodyguard, and it's this programming which causes everything to go sideways. The Alfred Protocol spreads, taking out every villain, every criminal he deems a threat to Bruce Wayne's life. However, it doesn't end there. The Alfred Protocol also realizes in order to protect Bruce, it also needs to change him, protect him from himself and his emotions by eradicating them, starting with his fear. This change infects and transforms Batman into a cyborg version of himself known as the Murder Machine, who then goes about killing everyone, determining that everyone and his attachment to them is a weakness. Number 3. The Batman Who Laughs. This dark multiverse story was so terrifying it got its own series. The Batman Who Laughs actually got a miniseries to explain just how his story went down. By now we all should mostly know it, but if you haven't read it, it's chilling and thrilling and it's definitely worth a read. In the story, it's explained how Batman became corrupted by Joker venom when he ended up losing control and killing the Joker, triggered by being forced to watch the Joker kill children's parents in front of them before exposing them to Joker venom and driving them insane. When Batman killed Joker, this exposed him to Joker venom, which was released with the Joker's dying breath from his heart. Batman was then driven insane by the venom, becoming a warped Joker-Batman hybrid, and set out killing everyone, even the members of the Bat family, only allowing Damian Wayne to be converted with the venom and join him. He also later confessed that Alfred was one of the last people to try and stop him by blowing him up, but he managed to thwart and capture Alfred and break him, turning him into his own loyal servant once more. Number 2. The Judas Contract. So as bad as the Judas Contract storyline in the main continuity was for the Teen Titans, apparently its consequences could have been a lot more horrific and a lot worse. In this story, Tara finds herself inspired to become her own murderous villain all her own after one of Dick Grayson's inspirational chats. Great job, Dick. Grayson thinks that he's inspired Tara to become her own person separate from Geoforce's shadow though, not Deathstroke's shadow, as he does not know yet that Tara is actually a spy. She ends up unlocking her potential as a result, becoming more powerful than ever, taking up the name Gaia. She not only tears Slade Wilson apart, literally, but she kills the entire team of Teen Titans, even poor Beast Boy, no! And she also kills the entire Justice League. Number 1. Nightfall. If you haven't read the Tales from the Dark Multiverse, you obviously need to, as they are all pretty crazy, and honestly, the scariest tale can be found in this first one issue. This is a spooky retelling of the Batman story Nightfall. When Bruce has his back broken, he passes the mantle of Batman onto Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. But when he returns, Azrael refuses to give up the mantle. Instead of Bruce Wayne and the Bat family winning it back as they did in the main continuity, this time around Bruce fails. He instead is held captive and tortured for 30 years by Azrael, who rules Gotham with a bloody and merciless iron fist as Saint Batman. Bruce eventually escapes with the help of Bane's son, Torn, and his mother, Lady Shiva. But his time in imprisonment, where he was slowly dissected, has changed Bruce, and no longer is he the man and hero we once knew.
Number 10. Doomsday. I have to just assume that Batman is afraid of Doomsday, and there are multiple reasons I believe this. For starters, anytime I've seen Batman even attempt to get involved in a fight with Doomsday, he is never throwing punches. He is either staying the heck out of the way, maybe only acting as a distraction, or he is powered up by some serious magical artifacts. Secondly, Batman is incredibly smart. He knows how hard it is for someone to take down Superman, and the fact that Doomsday is one of the few characters who is able to do it, and with such brutality, there is no way Batman is not intimidated by this monster. I refuse to believe it. Honestly, my favorite point of proof is seeing what Ben Affleck's Batman does in Batman vs Superman. Say what you want about that movie, but Batman jumping around the battlefield just trying his best to stay out of the way? Hilarious. Number 9. Prometheus. As a dramatic inversion of Batman, the tragic figure of Prometheus presents a serious threat to the Dark Knight. Enraged by the passing away of his parents at the hands of law enforcement, Prometheus vows to fight the law with the same intensity intensity that Batman seeks to uphold it. Backed by ludicrous sums of money, Prometheus trains diligently and becomes the bane of police officers and military men across America. Armed with an all-powerful helmet, Prometheus earns godlike powers that give him the strength of the best fighters on Earth. It's no wonder that when he breaks into the Justice League Watchtower, he single-handedly beats the majority of the team, and Batman takes the majority of that shellacking. Prometheus runs the Dark Knight into the ground. It was the first showdown between the two orphans, and Prometheus takes the victory without any effort at all. Hey, are you liking this video? Well, then hit that thumbs up button, rookie. We need your support. Number 8, Zsasz. Victor Zsasz has a character trait that a few others on this list possess. He's just completely and utterly insane. Zsasz scares Batman for one main reason. Whenever he is not locked up, it's almost guaranteed that lives will come to an end, which just ups the ante because every escape of this killer becomes a race against the clock for Batman. He needs to bring him down fast before he adds another scar to his body. Every single one of those scars signifies a failure for Batman. Zsasz is a man with absolutely no form of pity or morals, and he will never stop unless he passes away, but we know Batman will never do that. In an alternate story, Injustice, Zsasz is even responsible for the passing of Alfred Pennyworth, which was not supposed to happen, but because Zsasz is Zsasz, it did. Number 7, Thomas Wayne Batman. Other versions of Batman always have the potential to be a scary thought for our Batman, or anyone, really. But when that version of Batman is Bruce Wayne's own father, who completely destroys him emotionally, teams up with Bane, and is trying to stop Batman being Batman so he can have a normal life, it's an incredibly interesting idea for a character, honestly. But with all the daddy issues Batman has, for his alternate reality father to be so twisted and brutal has got to be a terrifying thought. But what did Thomas do that was so bad? Well, let me tell you. Alongside Bane, he ruined Batman and Catwoman's wedding, causing her to leave him at the altar, nearly had Batman send Mr. Freeze to the afterlife for a crime he did not commit, kidnapped Damian Wayne, hired the KG Beast to take out Dick Grayson, he had Bane put Alfred Pennyworth in the ground, then Thomas incapacitated Bruce with fear toxin and kidnapped him. He dug up the coffin of Martha Wayne, wishing to use the Lazarus Pit to resurrect Martha so that they could all be a happy family again. He went more than a little overboard is what I'm saying. Number 6, the Batman Who Laughs. Another version of Batman, only this time it's basically the ultimate evil version of himself. A Jokerized Bruce Wayne. He is just absolutely awful. He has all the smarts and skill of Batman himself, but the completely bonkers unpredictability of Joker. And this combo causes the Batman Who Laughs to become one of the biggest threats to the entire multiverse. Now, being a Jokerized Bruce Wayne, he has a few differences to the man himself. He's thinner and faster, but physically weaker. Unfortunately, physicality in battle with this guy doesn't really matter. He's got backup in the form of his Dark Knights, and he has backup plans on top of backup plans as any Batman worth his salt would have. This guy put his consciousness into a Batman with the power of Dr. Manhattan and destroyed Perpetua, the first creator of the multiverse and the mother of the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and the World Forger. Number 5, Superwoman. While Superwoman is technically an alternate version of Wonder Woman, originally she was actually the Lois Lane from Earth 3, who on this world was seemingly an Amazon as she wielded the lasso of submission instead of truth, which is capable of forcing others to do her bidding and forcing them to love her. But this Superwoman had abilities that were more like a Kryptonian's. She was capable of not only everything Wonder Woman could do, but she could fire beams of red-hot energy from her eyes, and she could fly. She created an incredibly toxic love triangle between Ultraman and Owlman of the Crime Syndicate of America, and even had a child with Owlman, but promised to Ultraman that it was his. This was also while she was having another affair with Alexander Luthor. Damn girl, keep him pretty busy, huh? Yikes. Number 4, Raven from the Last 52 Multiverse. The Batman Who Laughs comes from the Dark Multiverse, which is the flip side of the regular multiverse, composed of worlds where nightmares become real. All the worst case scenarios actually came to be on these worlds. During the final battle between the Batman Who Laughs and Wonder Woman, Laughs summons different heroes turned villains from across the Dark Multiverse to help him, and among the various characters is a version of the Teen Titans led by a version of Raven who gave in to her father Trigon, who corrupted both her and her Titans into twisted, powerful versions of themselves. Raven herself becomes a red-skinned, armor-clad demon. She actually looks kind of awesome, but she is undeniably evil and ultimately quite terrifying. Number 3, Furnace. Before the Martians became the Martians, they were an incredibly violent and powerful race called the Burning. The Guardians of the Universe experimented on the Burning and put genetic blocks in place to make them afraid of the fire they used as their most powerful weapon. Now fast forward, after the Justice League was trapped and taken down in Obsidian Age Atlantis, John Johns blamed himself for his friend's passing because his fear of fire completely overtook him. He recruits Scorch to help him overcome this fear, and he would use his telepathy to help her deal with her own problems. Unfortunately, in doing this, he also broke the genetic blocks, allowing John to become the incredibly dangerous Furnace, with all his original powers boosted in potential, especially his telepathy, plus an insane level of pyrokinesis. Number 2, Ultraman. In case you haven't figured out the theme of Earth 3, everyone here is just bad from birth. Ultraman was born on the dying Krypton to Jor-Il, who was able to secure a life pod for his incredibly powerful son, who he saw as his best chance of revenge. While in his life pod, Kal-Il was given the ideology of becoming the strongest possible being, eschewing all weakness in himself and in others. His rocket crash landed in Smallville, right through the home of the dysfunctional couple Johnny and Martha Kent, who he forced to be his parents until he was 7 years old, when he took their lives and burned their home to the ground. He took the name Ultraman, took over the Earth, and created the crime syndicate of America. Now unlike Superman, Ultraman actually gets more powerful from kryptonite, and the sun is what makes him weaker, which is fine because he will literally just move the moon to block out the sun. And in at number 1 is Vampire Batman. In the Elseworlds Batman and Dracula trilogy, Batman goes up against vampires who have turned Gotham into their home, and then eventually Dracula himself. In the first novel, Red Rain, the hero wipes out the vampires and Dracula, although he is transformed into a vampire himself. Which means we get to see Batman take on crime using the powers of a vampire in the next novel, Bloodstorm. He does his bestest to resist the darker aspects of being a vampire, but that all goes kaput when Batman lashes out and drains the Joker's blood after the Joker de-lifed Catwoman. Batman has Alfred and Gordon stake him, putting Batman into a catatonic state, a state that he is revived from in Crimson Mist, the third novel, when criminals took over Gotham in his absence. But he is almost completely animalistic now thanks to the isolation. A bloodthirsty vampire Batman quickly wipes out most of his enemies in a very bloody form, drinking their blood in the process until he is finally put to rest by Alfred, Gordon, Two-Face, and Killer Croc, who all go with him to the grave.
Coming in at number 10, we are starting with Zoom. This is starting off with an obvious choice. Eobard Thawne, also known as the Reverse Flash, or Zoom, is the arch nemesis of Barry Allen and has done a great job at keeping the Scarlet Speedster on his toes. Having worshipped the Flash more than anybody, even going as far as to recreate the reaction that gave Barry his powers, and having an operation done so that he could look like Barry Allen, Thawne wanted nothing more than to meet and befriend his hero. His killing tendency unfortunately came up not too long after that, when he killed the cashier at the Flash Museum so he could use the holy grail of all Flash memorabilia, the Cosmic Treadmill, so he could travel back in time to meet his hero. Unfortunately, there was a miscalculation and he ended up appearing several years after Allen's death. Distraught and upset, Thawne escaped to the Flash Museum to get some answers, only to find out that he was destined to become the Flash's greatest nemesis, Zoom. Needless to say, he did not take that news very well, and this set him down on his dark path. Since then, Thawne has done everything in his power to torment the Flash, going as far as killing his mother and fiancé and so much more. Talk about a quick temper. Number 9 is Dr. Destiny. John Dee was a pretty run-of-the-mill villain for the Justice League by creating tech that was more advanced than most people had ever seen, and thanks to this tech he was able to capture Green Lantern and set traps left and right for the Justice League. However, all this changed after he created the Materiopticon, which allowed him to manipulate and alter reality. He was eventually stopped by the Justice League by making him unable to dream, which in turn robbed him of his powers and drove him even deeper into insanity. Dee also appeared with a much darker reboot in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, where he is seen using his Materiopticon to take over a 24-hour diner to fulfill his sadistic desires and purposes. Number 8, Trigon. Now, I understand that teenage angst is a thing and not having a good relationship with your daughter isn't exactly a crime, but Trigon kinda takes that a little bit too far and ends up being the arch enemy of Raven from Teen Titans. Originally the ruler of an unknown alien planet, Trigon was able to absorb the power of the Heart of Darkness, which granted him an insane amount of power, allowing him to kill the Divine once and for all. Not only are his powers something to marvel, but just look at him. His terrifying demonic appearance already makes him someone that I do not want to mess with. However, I feel I could definitely take that sweater vest wearing Trigon from Teen Titans Go. Number 7, Murmur. Being a fairly new member of the Flash's Rogues, Murmur doesn't really have many appearances in the comics, but by no means does that make him any less terrifying. Dr. Michael Amar was once a very successful and respected surgeon until one day he could no longer take the voices in his head caused by his schizophrenia and decided that a killing spree was the only way to keep them at bay. This spree spread through Central City and Keystone City until he was finally detained by the police with the help of the Flash. With an incredible understanding of human physiology thanks to his many years as a surgeon and his unique blood type unlike anyone has ever seen, he can't be killed by any lethal injections, this villain is not someone you should mess with. Not to mention, he also cut out his own tongue and sewed his mouth shut. Number 6, Necron. Lord of the Unliving and one of the most powerful beings in the universe, Necron is a manifestation of death and the opposing force of all life itself. Before becoming the Lord of Unliving, we're not entirely sure what or where Necron was. Rumors have circulated that Necron is darkness itself, existing before life entirely, and then others say he was created by the darkness as his protector. First appearing in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps number 2 in 1981, Necron's most terrifying moment was his triumphant return in Blackest Night when he formed the Black Lanterns Corps, who I'll be touching on a little bit later. Thanks to the power of those Black Power Rings and the Black Lantern Central Power Battery, Necron was able to begin complete and utter devastation to the world during this time. The only thing that was able to take him down was Hal Jordan and the White Lanterns, who together overpowered Necron by resurrecting the Black Hand, which in turn severs his link with the living plane. With this link gone, his body is completely destroyed and the Blackest Night is over.
Moving on to number 5, Thrill Killer. Thrill Killer was a one-shot 3-issue miniseries published in 1997 that took place on an alternate timeline of Earth 37, set in the early 60s. It sees Batgirl and Robin taking on a female Joker. Now Bruce Wayne works for the Gotham PD and Barbara Gordon has purchased the Wayne Manor, using it to fight crime with her assistant and lover Dick Grayson. The Joker is known as a gangster named Bianca Steeplechase, who eventually poisons Robin, masquerades as the mayor's wife, and ends up kidnapping and torturing Bruce Wayne. Needless to say, it is a dark period piece all set at the dawn of the sexual revolution and the beginnings of the Vietnam War, and there's a whole lot of death. And it finds Batgirl doing the one thing that Batman in the main continuity refuses to do. She kills the Joker. She drowns her in Gotham River.
Coming in at number 4, The Dark Knight Returns. The Dark Knight Returns is arguably one of the most prolific comic miniseries in DC's history, and is largely responsible for a resurgence in darker, grim takes on the Caped Crusader that often prevails in our depictions of the superhero to this date. Set in a futuristic dystopian Gotham where technology runs rampant, a 55-year-old Bruce Wayne comes out of retirement as Batman to take on a new flood of crime in Gotham City. But he isn't met without opposition. The Gotham PD aren't big fans, nor are a new hyper-violent street gang called the Mutants. When the US government begins to see Batman's return as a major threat, Superman is deployed to take him on, culminating in one of the most memorable battles between the two iconic heroes. Penned by Frank Miller, it's a much more bleak take on the Caped Crusader, featuring him as a hardened, cynical vigilante still suffering from a traumatic past that haunts him every move he makes.
Up next in our number 3 spot, Gotham by Gaslight. One of the most beloved Elseworld stories to date, Gotham by Gaslight is set in the 19th century, following Bruce Wayne's beginnings as the Caped Crusader just as Jack the Ripper has shown up in Gotham City. You can see where this is going. Criminal activity is on the rise in Gotham and Bruce finds himself framed by Jack the Ripper for a series of murders after a bloody knife is found in his bed. After escaping from prison, Bruce ends up discovering the identity of the famous serial killer, a man who had worked with his father Thomas Wayne and went insane after his mother Martha Wayne had rejected his advances, and thus murdered both of them. A sequel was produced as well, Batman Master of the Future, which took place in 1892, a handful of years after Gotham by Gaslight, but it failed to get the same rave reviews as its predecessor. Needless to say, there's murder and it's dark.
In at number 2, Amazonia. From 1997, Wonder Woman Amazonia is a one-shot that takes place between 1888 and 1928 on Earth 19. When a mysterious explosion kills Queen Victoria and all of her immediate family members, a mysterious individual named Jack Planters claims to be a distant heir to the throne and becomes King Jack, a tyrant who actually murdered the royal family in order to come into power. It's implied that this is Jack the Ripper, who had also murdered 4 Whitechapel prostitutes for practice prior to knocking off the royals. So where does Wonder Woman fit into this narrative? Diana, while this is happening, is abducted off of Paradise Island by Steve Trevor, who on this Earth, is rather wicked. He forces her to marry him, and by 1928 Diana has become a star in London theatre. But in response to the militaristic society King Jack has created, she organizes a resistance. Under his rule, the British Empire is incredibly misogynistic, has suspended all women's rights, and has declared an unjust war against France. So Diana steps up and ends up working with Jack's son, Prince Charles, to take the tyrant down.
And last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Kingdom Come. Written by Alex Ross and Mark Waid in 1996, Kingdom Come is one of the most nerve-wracking alternate realities to exist within the DC multiverse. It is a deconstructionist tale that explores the toxic dynamic between traditional out-of-touch superheroes and a new generation of vigilantes who are largely amoral and irresponsible, and not above committing murder and other heinous acts to stop criminals. Batman, of course, finds himself in the middle of these two groups, trying to de-escalate the tension in hopes of preventing a metahuman war. The Justice League has stepped down, and a new team of heroes led by a character named Magog have put the Earth in peril. During an attack on Parasite, thanks to their reckless planning, millions of Americans are irradiated and killed, and a large portion of the America's food population is wiped out entirely, putting the nation in precarious circumstances. And it only goes downhill from there. So definitely read that one, no spoilers.